Hello and welcome to the B&B Show. My name is Brandon Kane. This guy right here to my left, that's going to be Seahawks Brendan Nelson here, my cohort in crime, as we continue to put a little bit of a button on this draft, get the last finishing touches. You get through a little bit of a draft initially, and you certainly have looked at all these players up and down, but you get through the post-draft process, and this gives you more of an opportunity to really go to as far as lengths as you can to really understand these players that the team has taken and why they took them and the plan that's in place for them. And then if maybe some of your initial projection changes and adapts, maybe plus or minus in your outlook of the player, as that can go either way when you kind of get this chance to take more of an intricate look. It'd be nice to be able to take the intricate look on all, Brendan, 320 players, but that's kind of hard to do when you have such the time we do. So
yeah, it's much easier to spend all day looking at a player when you know he's on your team.
Yeah, exactly, and understand how the plan will really truly fit, not how theoretically it'll fit. If we maybe draft him, if this happens, that happens. But how are you doing on this day? How was the off-season treating you here, man? As we continue to roll along through.
So far pretty good. I mean, it's been about as active an off season as you can have when you think about it. You swap out your entire coaching staff except for Carl Scott. You're not going to get much more than that, but there's still this part where you get into mid-May through probably early August, and there's just not going to be a lot going on. So you learn how to take that, you learn how to live with that. And if you're really willing to put yourself out there, there is stuff that you can find to think about even during that early part of the season.
Indeed, there is. What part of what's made it, I guess, is going to make it easier for me, Brendan, over the next month is the trying to understand the offense and defense. I felt like we could kind of know, well, the offense was maybe a little bit different over the last couple of years, but for the most part, we knew what we were getting in defense year in and year out with. But with this one, it's been as much trying to go back and watch that Baltimore Raven tape and kind of try to understand what's going on as much as one can at this level of things, being a novice at it or whatever. And it's definitely going to take a while to kind of understand this one, like the understanding was there on the last defense and how that one all kind of worked together. But you're right. It's definitely that time period we're heading into. We're going to look at today, folks, a couple of the players at the front of the draft here today and come back here into next week, looking a little bit at maybe the back in the draft and a couple of select UDFAs as far as deep dives go. But I guess, and before we get to that, maybe some are wondering about the OTAs. Me and Brendan both are of like mind of this in that we don't really look at the OTAs at where we're at right now is that there being a lot to be taken away from the OTAs here. These guys, as they said yesterday, 20% of his playbook is being installed so far as Mike Macdonald's concerned?
Which I wonder if that's good or bad. Like, it seems pretty good, right? Because they've only done 2 OTAs, and then they did the rookie mini camps, and they've done probably some stuff off the field, like in the tape room. So 20% seems pretty good because they've still got, I want to say, like 6 OTA sessions left. Then they have the mini camps and then the actual training camp. So 20% seems like that's good, but I wonder if it actually is.
Hard to say, as you say. It's because we've never really been here recently, and because his system is so intricate, I think that makes it harder, Brendan, to predict how fast that onboarding is really at, or if that's kind of ahead of schedule, or if it's behind. But it's definitely, I think they're trying to slow play a little bit, understanding that this is something we're trying to put on and bring on that's much different than what you guys have had here before, and we can't just throw that on your shoulders all at once and say, let's go, take it all. And that's both sides of the ball at the same time. But I think the only thing you really want to see with the OTAs, Brendan, beyond trying to, this guy looked amazing. This guy was out there making it happen. And I know people are getting this way. Devin Witherspoon I'm sure you're hearing some of the same on the cut-ups from this. So we got to slow down. It's good he's looking that way and he's getting the praise, and that's great. But this is really not much to be taken when they're not in pads. They're not installing the full systems. They're not running full steam. You just want guys healthy. You want your first round pick signed by this point in camp, everything Hardy there. By this point last year, I think Witherspoon was he out there last year, but unsigned? Isn't that what they did with him?
I believe so, because you can participate in the mini camp without being signed.
Yeah.
But I don't you can participate in training camp without being signed or something like that.
Yeah, it was something along those lines. So you just want everybody out there and ready to go. Murphy certainly looks the part, but not much else to really be taken from, unless you've got some other thoughts on the subject, Brennan, from what you've taken out of camp.
I mean, they gave a not super encouraging update on Abe Lucas, I guess. I wasn't thrilled about the way they put it there, but Pete Carroll was always a guy who would be overly optimistic about injury stuff. Maybe Macdonald won't be like that. Maybe he'll be overly pessimistic about injury stuff,
Yeah, hopefully so. We've got decent writing on the fact that he can bounce back, albeit that you do now at least have in Fant a little bit, maybe more of a sure option than you even had in Forsythe, who played pretty well for you over there, but he gives you a little bit better of an option maybe. But not encouraging. Yeah, they were much just sort of seemingly a wait and see kind of mindset when it still came with Lucas more than it was, oh yeah, he'll be running full ready to go by training camp, no doubt about it. We're like, we'll check back in at training camp. It's kind of the feeling.
We did get a positive update on Nwosu. That was good, I guess. I like that.
That was good. I was kind of expecting though on that one, because those torn pecs don't tend to be ones like dodgy knees or backs that persist and you can't seem to get over it. It's like, well, yes, it will tear, but yes, you can get through the full recovery and expect it to probably bounce back at least almost close to or near or at where it was before as far as strength and whatnot, especially having the extra time, because he did tear it reasonably early in the season. But those things are good markers for the team that those guys are healthy, and it's that way. The Rams, for instance, just had Kyron Williams go down to some mysterious foot injury. Brendan, are you getting vibes this thing's a little more serious, or was that because they're kind of like, you're already hearing, but we got quorum now, so we'll be okay. But see, that's those things you don't want to see happen in these OTAs, is some guy more than it is about the great things you kind of
what's going on in Denver already. They lost Drew Sanders, and today I guess Dulcich got hurt again.
If they got the same strength and conditioning coach in there, seems like every offseason rolling through 3 or 4 guys that go down in that Denver organization.
Yeah.
One way or another. So yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. Drew had a season ender too, didn't he? He's done. Achilles. Full on done. That's brutal.
Yeah. You can forget about it.
I remember us looking at him real deeply for the Seahawks back a couple years ago.
Yeah, they're moving him to edge, aren't they? And we were thinking about him as an inside linebacker, so that's kind of interesting.
It is. He did have some background there doing some of the edge stuff, but he is just so big and plays so tall. It's hard if you can't really sink in as a linebacker and you're just this big target there for those linemen to come downhill. And I'm sure that's probably some of what draws that out. But, we'll see how it goes. Those Achilles are tough. We'll see if he can bounce back. Certainly benefits to the Seattle, though, week 1 if Denver has a couple guys going down. Not praying for it or asking for it. I don't want to bring that bad stuff back to our Seahawks, Brendan, but hey, if it happens, it happens.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive into these first 4 guys here in this draft. And I'm really interested to hear your opinion coming out here with the first guy we're going to talk about, because I know that this is a guy that, you initially and got to give you credit to sticking to your guns on your evaluation where you stood, and you didn't. It's part where I think sometimes people get lost a little bit at times, where it's, you like the guy coming out. I think that got lost a bit on draft day, and a bit of the reaction was out there at times that you weren't as bubbling over on the Byron Murphy selection as many maybe were hoping for you to be in. And you did like him coming out. And that's the part I was trying to say too, from my perspective of it. We're talking about this difference between being, I really like him to, he's a top end grade A prospect as far as this draft is concerned, or should be looked about, or even as I've bandied about here, maybe being the best defensive player in this draft. Where do you sit now, having this more of this deep dive look at Byron Murphy? Has it moved your needle in any one way or the other, or is it just reinforced your initial evaluation of him?
Well, I still don't think he's Aaron Donald. I'll say that. And I do say that for a reason. I'm not just saying that as some kind of straw man, because that's what I keep hearing. When the people who really like Byron Murphy talk about him, they talk about him like, we just got Aaron Donald. We just got Jalen Carter. We just got Cortez Kennedy. I don't see any of those things. I stand by that. I do think he's a good player. I do think that there is a scenario where in his prime, he can be like an all-pro caliber defensive lineman. I think that pathway is a little bit thin. I do think there are some obstacles to him getting there. he might just end up capping out as a really good, maybe Pro Bowl caliber defensive lineman. And there would certainly be nothing wrong with that. I think that would be fine. But if I'm taking a look at the other defensive players in this draft, it's hard for me to say that I think he was the best of them. There were a few guys that I feel pretty solidly were better than him. Now, this is where positional value comes into play, right? Because the interior pass rush, which is what Byron Murphy's all about, providing pass rush in the interior, is more important than most other things you can have on defense. It is the most important thing. It's more important than edge rush. It's more important than cornerback play. It's certainly more important than linebacker play or safety play. Those things are getting deprioritized in the modern NFL. So that's where I'm trying to figure out exactly how to balance this stuff. But to quickly summarize how I feel about Murphy coming out of my deep dive into him, it's not too radically different from where I was. I think he's a good player. I think the pick is fine. I don't think we're going to regret it or feel bad about it. But if you are watching this stream right now, you probably like this player more than I do, because most people do. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's totally fine. But if you're watching this stream right now, you probably like this player a little more than I do.
When I went back and did my deep dive back in on him, Brendan, something that stood out that was not a part of my initial process in looking at him was how much he was truly being asked to play nose tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a difference between saying I have a 3-tech that gets kind of sprinkled in, like the little pinch of a sprinkle you take when you're putting in a recipe, and you say, okay, it's always this, but we're just going to take a sprinkle of his snaps and throw him over here at nose tackle, versus Murphy, where you had 2 hands go in and dump it over there to the other side, where he's playing so much of that nose tackle. When we cross-reference that up first, a guy like Jalen Carter of last year, or a guy like Elijah Cansey of last year, or a guy like a Devontae Wyatt from 2 years ago who came out in Georgia, I don't remember these guys being asked to play that position that often over the course of their snaps. Does not move much of the needle for you at that point with that in that respect?
That is something that I was somewhat aware of at the time of the draft. I'm looking at some of the numbers I pulled from PFF right now. In his career, out of 1,100 snaps that he played, over 400 of them were at the nose, and then about 700 were at the D tackle spot, the I guess B gap, you would say.
Mm-hmm.
So I was definitely aware of that, and that's fascinating, right? Because he's playing with Devondre Sweat, who is about as pure of a nose tackle as you will ever see, in theory, and yet this guy continually takes the snaps away from him at that spot. So I definitely did note that. I think that's really interesting that they would choose to make him their nose tackle for a run defense that I think was the best in the country last year. It was right up there. If it wasn't number one, it was right there. You didn't want to run on that team is the point.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that's very interesting, and I wonder why it happened. I wonder if there was something they didn't like with Sweat. I wonder if maybe they really just thought that Murphy was better in that role, even though all logic would indicate otherwise. Maybe they just genuinely felt like he was better in that role. But I'm aware of that. I'm definitely aware of the nose tackle thing, and that's very impressive that he is a guy who is not even 300 pounds is able to do that well. And clearly he's doing something right because of how good Texas's run defense is.
That's where I guess, and I'm paring this back and ask you questions off my own eval, but it's a little bit just, I'm more kind of sounding board off with you on this more, Brandon, than anything else. In that, when I go back, there's really 2 big factors as I do the deep dive back that does move my needle a little bit more and again, being a guy we did like coming out. This was not a guy that had like low round, liked him a lot, but that's to me a major factor into it. When I go back and I'm watching the tape and over again, and the 400 snaps, I'll take PFF's word for it. It feels like more when you're watching the tape and you really lock into how often he's taking on those double team blocks in the run game over and over again, and at the centerpiece of that. And then you put that to me, Brendan, with the other side of this, sort of the other side of this particular coin, which is then the amount of double teams he garners in pass protection. And these are two things that to me aren't easy things to always look at when we're going through the initial evaluation on guys. And we're just looking at how they do. Are you winning your rep? Are you not winning your rep? But when you really do laser in and lock in, Brendan, on how often he's getting double teamed, and even going back to last year where I can watch an Alabama game with Bryce Young back there, doubled over and over and over again in pass protection. There's the snap that you may remember where remember Bryce Young's in the end zone and they almost had the fumble on him or the safety, but then the official gave Alabama the whole call on that. And it was a little bit of a thing at that point because Texas looked like they were going to upset him. He's being doubled on that play in pass protection. And then you go back again to this year against Alabama, and I'm watching all of the snaps in pass pro again with him this year, and he's again in doubled. And then the one times they single him up and give him that opportunity as a singled up guy, he's back there getting home or creating pressure. And those are two big factors to me that weigh heavily on him, that when I think of other defensive tackles coming out recently, Donald got his share doubles, but you couldn't afford to do that because of really where that Georgia line was at, to just basically concentrate wholly on him. And they ran a lot of games to Georgia's defense with blitz packages and stuff that was less about what Texas is doing, just their front four guys. But I put those two things in, and I just don't think that other defensive tackles we've looked at as prospect coming out have had that much attention drawn to them incessantly, kind of play after play like that.
Yeah. I took notes on a couple of his games, and I definitely noticed that he's handling those double teams pretty well. Like I was watching his game against BYU, and I know BYU is not exactly a powerhouse, but they're putting him at nose tackle constantly. They're double teaming him, and he's splitting through the double team to generate pressure. When they went to an odd front, they actually had him playing nose tackle, so it's not even just a thing where he's like the one tech. They're actually using him as a zero tech whenever they go odd front over, again, T'Vondre Sweat, which is not what you would expect going into the tape, I think. The BYU game, which I really looked at very closely, he actually had 0 tackles in that game. But you watch that game, he's always around the ball. He's always affecting the play in some way, even if he's not necessarily making the play himself. Seems like on passing plays and running plays, both, he's getting double teamed consistently. So I get it. There's some great stuff here. So I liked his jump at the snap. I think he's got a great first step off the line, very quick. I think all that stuff is definitely present from the tape that I saw. And that's certainly something that is factored into my evaluation of him, and which is why I think he's a good player, and I think we will be pretty happy with this pick. There are some things that I'm wondering about. Like he's not a good tackler, right? Like he's just not. Let me see, I wrote it down here. He had 70 tackles in his career and 11 missed tackles. That's not a very good rate. It's a little, and it's not just the bad tackling. It's kind of like this Jadeveon Clowney type thing where he's really good at disrupting the play. He's really good at getting involved near the ball, and then he doesn't always finish the way you would like. That was very much what Clowney was all about in his career. Like, I thought he was great for us that year he was here. He had 3.5 sacks that year. He didn't finish. He was just really, really destructive. And I kind of see that a little bit with Murphy as well. So I think that's a consideration as well. That's also something that I'm a little bit wary of, comparing him to these all-time greats like some people are.
Yeah, I think it's completely fair to the questions about finishing and tackling. I think it's really more just the finishing with the missed tackles that come with him having a chance to take a quarterback down in the pocket and just missing the tackle. It can't be explained away as some other factor came in, like you were held and being grabbed on. He's just flat missed it. There's a snap against Alabama this year where he's running a loop. He gets a free and clear shot, finally gets a single block, gets there fast. He's got the quarterback right in his sights, and the QB just spins up out of his control. And I think that is a place that is definitely a spot to look at with him that is a little bit of a concern. I did do just a video about 3 days ago that I dropped, Brendan, which was around where my comparison landed for him. And I think that I'm with you 100% on saying that he's not Aaron Donald. And I don't like any kind of part of really that comparison, to be honest with you. I don't. What I do think, though, is after going back and looking through this, I also don't like as much just the comparison of going to Grady Jarrett or going to, Geno Atkins or Ed Oliver. as these guys that get mentioned as well. And I do think that there's more there. And I don't think his lack of finish necessarily is enough to neutralize that when he is such a good all-around player. And there's a reason to believe that he can improve on some of that. Can he improve on his finish? Can he improve on coming a little bit, especially understanding he is kind of new to the position? And as we talk about all the time, we give those guys that are new to the position a little bit more room to have that upgrade and improvement. But the guy that I landed on in the video for me, and it is a kind of a quote unquote all-time great, though his production came from a long career and he was an undrafted guy coming out due to being an undersized guy, was John Randall. And I think when I went back and watched the tape between going back looking at Randall and going back and looking at Murphy, I think that there's a lot of similarities that were there. And that's where I end up landing with him, is a little bit of, there's a definite jump to me, is that it's not just that he's playing the nose tackle kind of some of the times, like so very often, and not just that he's getting doubled some of the time, he's getting double time a whole lot of the time, and still able to make some action happen. And then when he did get the single blocks, he'd go out there and he would eat. He would just butcher the block right up. And you go, okay, that's why they're double teaming him so much, is all these coaches are looking at it. And so I said in my video, Brendan, you've got so many coaches week after week that are looking at this Texas line that's got a Tavondre Sweat, that's got the blitz ability of what was it? The linebacker they had there.
Oh, Ford.
That they like to send. Yeah, they'd send Ford on all these blitzes, and you still just keep drawing those double teams down to him, snap after snap. They're telling you something. It's one thing when one offensive coordinator does that over a given week, and you go, okay, well, he just is scared of him. But when they're kind of all doing that, I feel like they're kind of signifying. And I'll tell you, that Washington game, he wrecked shop. He was like, they could do nothing with him, could Washington. Even when they doubled him at times, he was still creating pressure. And so, yeah, but your whole thing on the finishing is completely fair, and something I saw as well that did show up with him, where he's got to get that pulled down. He's also got to find a way to have the officials call him when he's getting held, because there's times on tape where he's getting blatantly pulled down, ripped down to the ground, and it's right out there in the open because he's beat the block and can't get a call for his life at times.
Yeah, but I think he led the country in pressure rate for an interior defensive lineman last year. That's certainly a thing. PFF had him at 45 pressures in 14 games, and that doesn't sound great, but he only played 438 snaps. So that's one pressure every 10 snaps approximately. That's pretty remarkable. That's definitely a thing.
And again, factoring how he's doing that against double teams so often. How many of that? It's one thing if the guy, like going back to Aaron Donald's tape, and I can't prove this. I tried to go back and find the PFF stats on this, and I couldn't locate this. I don't remember Donald, and I looked at Donald very closely coming out because I was hoping he'd fall down to our Seahawks at that time, and the Rams just jumped on him early in that draft. But I don't remember even a guy like Donald coming out getting this many double teams coming out. He was wrecking shop. He was more productive than Murphy this last 2 years. Yes, tackle for loss machine and sacks and all of that stuff, but he was getting single blocked when you watched his snaps over and over again. Teams weren't just accounting for him and making him this big issue or problem that they have to feel like deal with on tape. And that's the thing that when I look at recent defensive tackles, you and I are scouted in recent years, nobody's garnered this much attention outside of maybe a Jalen Carter was kind of close to it at times. But like I say, with them, Georgia runs, this is part of what makes it hard to evaluate any of those Georgia linemen, is that they run so many games and do, it's sometimes the guy's just running a task, he's running over here and slanting to take up a blocker so the blitzer can get around the other shoulder. Right.
Right. Yeah. That's probably fair in that regard. Now, if you asked me who I think is better between Byron Murphy and Jalen Carter on the football field, I would certainly take Carter. So
yeah, I with Carter, of course, well, and I'm with you on that. I still maintain, I think Carter's a generational talent. The worry with him goes to work ethic. And he's also got that preeminent build you would love to have in a defensive tackle. We have to acknowledge in Murphy, certainly he is, a little undersized in the position from, what, there's 3-inch difference between the two, 4-inch difference between the two or whatever. So it's, that's no small itty bitty thing there either. So I think that's completely fair. I'm not trying that I'd say that he's gotten to the point where I put him in a generational point, but I would put him in a spot, the guy that could, with his upside, tap into a John Randall type. He has a lot of the similarities in what he does in his game that I think can translate to the NFL level. He can be lined up here, Brendan, on the inside shoulder of let's say a center, and post snap end up way over on the outside shoulder of that center. And the center just thinks he's shooting the gap. And the center's now having to try to recover back to the outside on the other side. And he wins the rep at that point. And it's all he has to kind of do. And he just gets to play this game then with these offensive linemen, especially when he gets single blocked, is I can get over here to the spot, kind of this lateral and forward quickness where he can kind of do both at the same time that I think is going to uniquely translate here in the NFL level. And that's the thing that when I went back to the John Randall comparison, on top of these guys have a lot of the same moves, how they win with their effort level, but then the ability to just, I'm quick, but I'm sideways and forward quick, where you're just going to be laterally trying to get the spot. I can get way over here and get actually upfield at the very same time, where a lot of other players would just be getting lateral to try to get to that same gap. And maybe I'm being wowed by it too much, Brendan, but I think this will be a good pick for the Hawks. And I think this guy's got some upside that, I don't know, maybe a little bit more than I thought even on draft day.
Yeah. One thing I did notice when watching the 2023 tape, he lined up outside a little bit, like less than once a game. So very rarely he would line up, well, not outside, over the tackle is what they call it, where you line up in front of the tackle. So not an edge rusher, but you're like, I don't know, maybe you'd call it like a 5-tech.
Yeah.
And it seems like he always gets the inside shoulder when he does that. He can always just make an inside move and he's got it. He's good. I did notice that. I thought that was pretty cool. So one thing I wanted to ask you, because this guy is very short. To give you guys an idea, he's 6'0.5". So he's 6 feet and 1/2 an inch tall. That is second percentile for interior defensive linemen at the combine. So he is one of the shortest defensive linemen ever. I kind of feel like that's a good thing because of the leverage game. I know that there are some downsides to it, but I do actually think I would rather have a shorter defensive lineman like this for leverage purposes than a taller one. Do you agree with that?
I think it's a great catch. The thing I think you're looking for within it, Brendan, is that when you have the shorter guy, he then has to have the power. He has to be able to supply the ability to say, you're going to be naturally undersized. You're naturally going to be susceptible to being swallowed up by blocks by bigger men. So do you have sort of that always got Hulk power for being 6 foot tall? Does he have this abnormal amount of power for being in at that size? And in Murphy's case, I would offer to you, yes. And that in the case of a lot of these guys that we would talk about being the comps I didn't quite like, but still all those are good players if he becomes those players. If he becomes Grady Jarrett or becomes Ed Oliver, or he becomes who's the other guy? I said Geno Atkins. We'll be tremendously happy with the pick. So don't get me wrong there. But those guys were also all undersized guys that could get up underneath the pads. I was talking about that quickness move that he does so much on tape, where he's in front of that lineman and he's on your inside shoulder. And man, as an offensive lineman, you're like, he's going to shoot that shoulder right there. I know he's coming on that. And you go snap and he bounds around the side. You mentioned the leverage part. That's the part that factors into this, because now when he bounds around to that side and that lineman's going over there to catch him, rather than lineman catching him like here, he's catching the lineman up under his, up under his armpit, almost right there into that side of the chest where he's winning that leverage war. So he's beat the lineman to the spot. He's got the leverage win, Brendan. And then here comes the rip move, which is just the clearing move at that point. It's not him. That's not the move to get him clear. He's cleared. That's just the one to keep his guy on his back. That's all he's doing there with the rip at that point. And then he's going towards the quarterback and he's got the baseline to the quarterback. And that's where he gets those quick, easy pressure wins constantly, because not only is he quicker than me in that spot, but yeah, you're right. He's got that undersized build to then get up under me, because the low man will always win on that stuff. And I think it's the combination of those traits. Where you lose on it, Brendan, is when you're 6 feet and then you're underpowered to do it. Where you don't have that freakish ability you may get underneath the pads, but you don't really have the ability to torque that guy up. This is what Donald, of course, had, right? And this is why I'm not trying to go back to Donald comp, but if you're going to be that size as well with Donald, he had that explosive next level, I can throw you across the room like a superhero kind of power that guys at that size just don't have. Even guys that like lift a lot of weights and are super strong just don't have. And Murphy's got a little bit of that to his game. I agree with you on the thing. We can't go to the Donald comp. I'm with you on that. That one, it makes me bristle. I think like it makes you bristle, where you go, no, I can't do that one. But I think there are some comps we can go to that still get really excited with them beyond just kind of the solid floor.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not pulling the Aaron Donald thing out of thin air. I still get comments that are like, we just got the next Aaron Donald. And it's like, that's a bad place to start with this guy. I think you're going to end up resenting him for things that are not his fault at all.
Yeah, 100. I would say with this with 100% certainty as well. It's like having Jerry Rice retire, and then that next offseason you draft a wide receiver and say, we just got the next Jerry Rice. No, probably not. That guy, he was different. There's some players in the sport that are just different, that are at even like beyond that Hall of Fame level, where they're just, this will be the guys that you mentioned when you talk about the best of their position, your Lawrence Taylors or Aaron Donalds will be in that mix. Variety Ray Lewis's. We can go down the line of these guys that get mentioned about it, but he'll be in that proximity, and I would not want to go there with it. I think that even going to a guy like, to me, with John Randall, I think there is a difference. Even a guy, Randall, who's a tremendously productive player for a long time, including with our Seahawks, by the way, Brendan. But it just can't go to that. There's a difference. There'll be a difference between Donald and everybody else in that realm.
Right. So he's going to be good. I think he's going to be good. It sounds like we're going to actually start him day one, because we're talking about moving Draymond to edge, at least somewhat. So that implies that the starters are going to be Leo and Murphy. And I think he's ready for that. I know he's young. He's going to be 21 when the season starts. So he's actually one of the younger rookies out there. You don't see very many 20-year-olds anymore. But I think he's ready.
Yeah, it'll be a rotation thing, I think, too. It's just about getting him snaps, and they'll work him in, I'm sure, to that role. But you're getting your reps and snaps and keeping it in alignment. I'm sure that'll be a big part of this. And so everybody will get their kind of touches down in there, so to speak, like it's basketball. Everyone will get their shots. But yeah, certainly Draymond being moved to the outside works in more snaps for him potentially in there.
Yeah. How do you feel about his fit in Macdonald's defense compared to a more like traditional 4-3? Because it seems to me his best asset is his ability to shoot gaps because of his burst and explosiveness. So in a normal 3-4, I might not like it as much, but Macdonald's 3-4, you've got Matabuke as an example of a guy who was able to produce tremendously well as a gap shooter in a 3-4. So I kind of feel like it'll be okay.
Yeah, I think his defense ends up operating so often once it goes to nickel packages like a 4-man front anyway. When you get to base downs and it's a 3-4, or they're going to go to like their bear, if they ever do go to bear fronts at all, but sure, that's a little bit of a different tale, Brendan, to me. But when you have them in their nickel situations, it's going to be a 4-man look if it's not a stacked front. And then that means, and the 3 tech will play a little bit more traditionally speaking, like you'd like. I'd say too that ability to take on those double teams, I mean, that's all about being able to 2 gap in a lot of ways, or hold your placement down, right? And so that's part of why, again, I like the upside with this guy when you talk about him as a well-rounded player, is those double teams he took on and held his ground, and sometimes is able to split them, show the fact that when he gets a single block on him, he's going to be able to take that single block on, hold that ground, and be able to get to the spot still after that, if you're asking him to do that on that play. And I mention this just because, Brendan, I think this is emerging more and more. And this is a thing I've been kind of in the last couple of weeks. It sort of started to dawn on me a bit when Macdonald brought up the fact that he was going to have at times his Will and Mike be ubiquitous, where there'd be times where, and I went and started to kind of have a little bit of a light bulb on this. And it's become more and more now with looking at Byron Murphy, quite frankly, Brendan, because I think what you're setting the stage to be able to do is mix everything up, especially right down the center of the defense, if this makes sense. And if I'm going to wackadoodle, let me know on this one. But you've got your nose tackle who can be a 3 tech post snap. You have a guy line up as a 3 tech who goes more to a nose tackle post snap. You got your Mike who becomes a Will, and your Will who becomes a Mike, and your free safety that becomes the strong, and your strong that becomes the free. And all this could potentially happen on one just given play from what you see pre to post snap. And is that not kind of the center marker of Macdonald at his core, Brendan, is what you see pre is, I'm going to show you something else completely post. And I think he's getting more and more, because this isn't much what he was doing with Baltimore, where it was more just the coverage changes. I'm talking about defensive line and linebacker changes. Do you think I'm off on this one, or do you think he is drifting a little bit in this direction?
I think that's the dream for a lot of coaches. They want to have a defense that can be like that. Hard to get the personnel that can pull it off, but I like that as a concept. I really like that idea as a concept. Having a defense that basically mirrors across the middle like that, where you could put like a line down the center of the field, and either side can be identical.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what I'm thinking.
So yeah, I do like that. Do you think we're going to play Murphy a lot at nose, or do you think he's mostly going to be a 3-4 end for us?
I think you do it off the stack fronts. So
Mhm.
I think he's predominantly still in that 3 tech. But what I'm thinking they're going to do is you have at times Jaron Reed's out there with Murphy. Murphy's coming out and giving Williams a blow, let's say. And here comes the stack fronts. And you double A gap, mug pressure it. And then the linebackers drop off and he's aligned in, let's say, a 3 tech prior to the snap being Murphy. The linebackers drop into coverage and Murphy rolls himself into the center. He basically knifes his way up into the center and into the other right, the other guard would be I guess the right guard at that point, depending on the way the formation's flipped. And now he's creating kind of that 1 tech nose tackle havoc on the play post snap from what he showed. And doing it that way. I'm thinking of it that way. Same way with Big Cat. The thing I like about this, Brendan, is where we've at times gotten to the point we want to pull our hair out, where we watch us take a player and move them from this position and tell them, oh, you've been doing this your whole life. Now you're going to go do this. All of these guys we can go down the line of talk about that center line you just talked about. Leonard Williams, he's played nose tackle. He's played 3-tech. Byron Murphy going back to college, nose tackle, has played 3-tech. Jaron Reed, nose tackle background at Alabama, 3-tech with Seattle, slid back to the nose tackle last year. As Macdonald talked about with his inside linebackers, both of those guys have background with both the Will and the Mike. You're not making this happen now for the first time with them. They have the familiarity within them already. And that's what, to me, gets me. And I mentioned this, Brendan, because I think it gets me excited on a couple of fronts. It gets me excited for how they can use Byron Murphy, because you can use him in a couple roles. If he starts to get dominant, Brendan, Macdonald's got the build in now to not just be able to double team him and shut him down and be like, well, Seattle doesn't have anybody else on their defensive line that can do much. Now that they've shut down Murphy, they've pretty much canceled out that whole D line. He can always bring those stack fronts and always bring those blitzes, even if he doesn't send him to pull the protections, but those double team protections back away from Murphy. So again, why I come back to liking the pick so much, but I love this thought that he's going to go, because Brendan, this shows again the two things. Number one, we've got a cutting edge defense. Number two, we don't have a coach that's rigid. And here's what the scheme was that taught me. Hand me the dusty book. What does it say to do on page 66? Okay, on 55, how does it say I got to deal with 3rd and 11s? He's adding to the book. He's adding to the pages within the book as he's going along with this, especially with just this new adaption in particular, because it has been only really coverages prior to this. As he said, we didn't in Baltimore have Roquan Smith playing the Will and then Queen playing the Mike. Queen couldn't play the Mike. They tried to have him do that early on in his career, and it didn't work for him. That's part of the reason they wouldn't made the trade for Roquan.
Yeah. Soon that playbook is going to be like the Al Saunders playbook. Remember his? It was apparently 700 pages.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
I think he was the OC for the Redskins back in the day. He was for the Chiefs. I think he was for a bunch of different teams. And his playbook, they said, was 700 pages long.
Hey, it's the Lord knows the offenses aren't getting less complicated. I don't know how you match complication with just simplicity and hope that works. To me, it's always made much more logical sense that the only way to counter the complexity of these offenses is to match it with complexity. And then how do you do that now, knowing that you can sometimes overwhelm those defensive players with too much checks, too much data, too much information? We again come though to the spot for me, Brendan, why I like Macdonald so much, because he comes from Martindale. That was Martindale's whole conundrum at the end. It was that my outside corners, when they go down, my starters, I don't have the backups to sustain in man coverage, but also I'm trying to have all my players get into the perfect check before every single play, and that's too much. I can't go that deep. I think Macdonald's found a little bit of the balance game here a bit. We'll see if he can continue here, but he has so far in the defenses that he's built, both with Michigan and with Baltimore.
Yeah.
We got a donation here from God's Gang. Thank you, God's Gang, for the $5 donation. I appreciate you for that, man. He says, listening to the Macdonald press conference makes reality set in. This is a new coach with a new system. This might take some time.
That's the right mentality to have, I think.
Absolutely, it is. I'm. It's going to be one that's going to be tough to preach, God's Gang, because I think that both of our audiences, all of our audiences on this, have a big part that is going to look to this next upcoming season and go, now's our time. Here we go. Let's let it rip. And there may be more of, we've got to be patient and let this system on board, and that there's going to be some growing pains within that might not mean initial high-end success this first season. And quite frankly, recent given history have tended to not mean initial great success in that first season. And that's that 20% he talked about. Is there not going to be a difference, Brendan, when you look at getting to next year? And he says we have 100% of the scheme instituted. Now we're working on details. Versus this year, where you stand saying we're 2 months out from the start of training camp and we got 20% of it onboarded. It's kind of hard not to believe you'll be in better shape when you come around to next year on that.
Yeah, I mean, the question is how many of the players come back? Like, we've got some inside linebackers on 1-year deals. We've got safeties on short-term deals. So, some stuff's in place. Like, Leonard Williams will be here next year. Byron Murphy will be here next year. Witherspoon will be here next year. So the big guns should be here. But I wonder, like, what are the odds that Baker and Dodson come back next year? Also, that changes things a little bit, obviously, when you bring in new pieces.
It does. It does. You got Mafe and Hull in there, I'd say, as well in there. So they'd probably factor in a bit. But Woolen. So I think there'll at least be more players than there is now that would have an understanding of it and what they need to do with it. And I do think that when it comes when we look at Brendan, Julian Love, Dodson, or Baker, I think I'd be pretty surprised if one of those guys don't end up on a contract extension after this season at some point. Maybe they'll flame out. Maybe all three of them don't. But I think, especially in the case of a guy like Julian Love, there's a lot where he ends up becoming a guy part of that long term anyway within that as well. And once you kind of add that in, I think you're going to be in better shape into next year. But with the key on this one being God's gang is we just got to be patient this upcoming year and not jump to this isn't going to work or jump to some, well, this obviously was the wrong move to do this, or the should have kept Carroll crowd, or any of that stuff. All that needs to go on the back burner this upcoming year. We should have kept Carroll crowd can come back around down the line, but they've got to give this a chance to truly have an opportunity to take hold, or else we're, what's the phrase I'm looking for, where you throw something out before it's had a chance to bake? I don't know. There's some.
It's like when you make a pizza and you just throw it on high, and then you try to scarf it down and you burn your mouth. I get it. It's like, thinking like, you make a pizza in a certain way, right? You follow the recipe. You let it, you want to leave it in the oven for a while now. Like, have you ever had TV dinners?
I have. Oh yeah.
Yeah. When I was living on my own, I had a lot of TV dinners, and I learned the difference between putting them in the microwave and putting them in the oven. There was a big difference. Like
the cold
TV,
middle, right?
Yeah, the microwave ones, like I couldn't even eat them. Like, they're disgusting. They're awful. One time I did microwave ravioli and it tasted like giant marshmallows. It was awful.
Oh yeah. No, it's bad. It doesn't cook it evenly, and it's just there's something wrong. It's a difference. It truly is. Well, yeah. So we got to Brendan's nice metaphor there. We can't take out the pizza out of the oven and start doing the Italian move where we're doing the flip thing and end up with it on the roof, because we got too excited for this upcoming year. So with you completely, both me and Brendan are going to be definitely advocating for people to, hey, if we get happily surprised by a great year, fantastic, but don't necessarily count on it, because you could have your heart broken.
Yeah, I will say that in recent years, it feels like that things have happened quicker in the NFL compared to how it used to be. Like, in the old days, it felt like a rebuild would take 4 years. Now it seems like it just takes 1 or 2. Like the Rams were a great example. They go from Jeff Fisher to Sean McVay, and instantly it's good.
Yeah.
Doug Peterson with the Eagles, he takes over from Chip Kelly. They've ripped that team to the studs post Chip Kelly, basically, outside of a couple pieces on the offensive line. And a couple years later, they win the Super Bowl. So I'm not saying we should all wait the duration of Macdonald's contract. He's got to show something in the next couple years here for me to feel good about him. But at the same time, we do have to understand that, this first year, it can go a couple different ways. And I think we should all be okay with that. Some people have this belief that if we had kept Carroll, we would have been off to the races. Like, this was going to be the year. 2024 was going to be the year with Carroll, because we had, I don't know, there seems to be some belief that Carroll was about to actually go on some kind of a run this year and win at least 11 games in a playoff game, which I don't know where you sit on it. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't. I don't feel it.
No, because I think his defense was solved. I don't know,
Yeah.
like, what more evidence do I need to show the jury that the man's defense was no longer working? I've got you and I have talked about this up and down. You weren't one generation removed of the LOB. It wasn't like we're a year removed from Chancellor and Sherman retiring. This had been turned over multiple times for it to be a talent problem, and merely blame the fact that you don't have good enough guys up there to get it done. That doesn't hold enough true water to it. And so there, to me, it came back to more and more there being just enough definitive proof. And this is why the team, I think at the ownership level, said we got to move on here, is that the proof becomes so overweighty, and that you're just at a denial point if you're going to ignore it, that to think that it was going to fix itself. And this is, tell me if I'm wrong, Brendan, does not it come down to the fact that I think even the most ardent Carroll supporter on this would tell me that if I said to them, what was going to be the big adjustment you were going to make this upcoming year? What was the thing they were going to do within the defense this upcoming year to make it better, to improve it on these things that have been bad? I don't think even they would have an answer they could give me specifically on what he would do exactly, or if he would do anything other than just, again, hoping some cylindrical thing would happen where his defense magically, now we're going to leave the Fangio cover 2 shell era and we'll head back into the cover 3 era. One of the kind of those situations, Brendan.
Yeah, I think that if you ask them that, because I see these people, I've seen them on social media and stuff, and I've seen the things they say, I think they would say he would have brought back Ken Norton Jr. and the defense would have gotten much better, and the offensive line would have been healthier in 2024, because it would be really hard to be less healthy than they were last year. And those two things combined would result in some great season, which, I mean, I certainly think Ken Norton was better as a DC than Clint Hurt was, but I'm also not believing that's ever going to produce like an elite defense, which is really what the standard should be if you have a defensive guru head coach who is one of the highest paid coaches in the league, right?
I would think so. The other thing with Ken Norton being here is this is the same guy that advocated for the Seattle Seahawks to be in a base defense 70% of the time in the modern passing age.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get to a place where Ken Norton is looked at as a guy who made that decision alone? You can talk to whatever else he was doing defensively. No team. I think the team that was behind us in number 2 place that year, in the number they were in base, the amount of percentage they were in base, I believe was like 34% or 35%. Let me say this again. We were in base that 2019 season 70% of the time. That's it's one of those things where, the why we go to Ken Norton, why people I think go to Ken Norton is not that they were aware of some rumor that Carroll intended to do that. In fact, that goes against everything that we heard with Carroll, was that he was asked to be looking at making changes this offseason. He was asked at having some people be replaced, like Hurt. And I'm sure, and that was part of why he took his stand to say, I don't want to do that. And they said, okay, well, we're going to move on. So that kind of goes against that whole Norton would come in here, number one. Number two, Norton wouldn't be an upgrade to the situation. He would still run Carroll's system. It was still going to be Carroll's system, whoever you brought in here. No new defensive coordinator was going to change that.
Yeah, well, when I say upgrade, I just mean in terms of the result, because I do think Norton would probably have produced better results in terms of allowing points than Hurt did, because Hurt was really bad. Hurt had more talent than Norton and produced much worse results. But I do think it would have been some kind of hire like that, where he hires one of his guys, if he's willing to move off of Hurt, which, again, like what you were just saying, maybe he wasn't, and maybe that's why he got fired. Maybe he got fired because he wanted to run it back with Hurt and Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs, and that was the point when they realized there's a disconnect between ownership and the coach that cannot be allowed to continue on.
That's my feeling on where it went, based on everything I've read about the situation. And it adds up that Carroll wouldn't want to be told about what he had to do with his staff. But I think you're right. He would have been brought another person that was in underneath his tree. And maybe it would have been Norton. I think Norton would have been a tough sell in the fan base, though. That's the one that's kind of wild to me. Like, how do you go from Hurt, who you hired after firing Norton, to go back to Norton, the fan base to be like, what? No, I don't think we're going to do that. But that's why we come down to it. It wasn't going to matter who he was going to bring on. You weren't going to improve that defense. That's the bottom line to it, is that defense wasn't fixing itself, and there wasn't going to be some cylindrical process that was going to occur that was suddenly going to make it magically better. It was going to continue to be feasted upon. Those plays that are talked about, the Seattle beater plays, still come into bear, and those wouldn't be changing anytime soon. And that's what needed to change if you were going to hope to get different results. So we might have been a team still with a high floor as a team, Brendan, a floor we may not have as much next year. So a floor where you say, okay, you're going to be an 8-win team next year. You're at least in a 9, maybe you can get up to 10 or 11 wins, but you're also not going to probably be in one of the elite teams in the NFC either. That would be enough to hold you back, especially against the tougher competition from being able to separate yourself, unless these young guys just were that so much better in this year in their development, which I think they'll be better, but that's too much asking them to carry that whole load on their shoulders.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm already ready for it. I know that if we don't win 11 or more games this year, people are going to say if we had kept Pete, we would have. And they're already kind of priming the pump to say it. And I just wanted to talk about that a little bit because I just kind of feel like we were stuck in that 9-win wheelhouse with what we currently had.
Yeah, I think so it's the part you give them, you go, okay, yeah, you might have been a game better, but we're not trying to get to a point of being better or just get into the playoffs every year. You're 1-5 since 2017 in the playoffs. You can get to a floor. Every one of those years, you weren't 4-11, 2 whatever. You were 7, 8, 9 wins all those other years in there, but you weren't winning playoff games because once you win against competition that was a little bit better than average, you weren't much past that. So you couldn't stand the test of time on that one. So, but it will come up, Brendan. We're trying to warn people. We'll still hear from it, but hopefully maybe they can start out good and hot in the gates, and it puts all that to bed quickly on this one. We can just move into this era and start the onboarding process. Swedish Shinobi, thank you for being a member of the Hawks Nest for 3 long months. He says, you know what? F it. I think Murphy will make the Pro Bowl as a rookie, will be a perennial All-Pro and first ballot Hall of Famer. I'm calling my shot. Well, it's here right now. It's on the screen, Shinobi. You screenshot timestamp this 4:51 minutes and 41 seconds into this live stream show, because if you call it, you will be able to reference it back and say, here's the timestamp. Check it. Check my intel, fellas.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice thought. It's that's basically the Aaron Donald career path, right? He made the Pro Bowl as a rookie.
He was a monster right out the chute. This is why I like my John Randall comp too, because he only had 1 sack his first year.
So did Cortez.
We give Johnny, gotta give him that 1 year to kind of find themselves. It's tough. It's tough being a pro all of a sudden. A lot of things to get used to. But I'll give you the props, Shinobi. If you hit on this one, I'll definitely give you the props with it. If he can become that, if the Seahawks can get a near Donald-like Pro Bowl talent added to this defensive line, that raises this defense up quite considerably, I would say, because it's one of the weakest spots that you've had in recent years. Now, if we go back to from where it was last year to now what you have with Williams and him there, maybe a little bit more development from Cam Young. Ooh, you're looking a little bit Mike Morris coming back into play. Okay, maybe we're starting to kind of cook with some oil here a little bit down there.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be nice. It would sure be nice to fall backwards into a perennial All-Pro defensive lineman.
I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate it, man. That's for sure. So I hope you're right, Swedish. Shout out to you if you are on that one, man. And thank you for your support, longtime support on the channel. Really appreciate it. Well, we carved up a bit on Byron Murphy a long time, but I want to talk about that, Brendan. I want to see where you were after kind of, coming back in, looking at it, especially when these specific items that we kind of were speaking about with him. So let's move on to, of course, our Seahawks not able to make it happen in round 2. Glad to hear, Brendan, though, just in a note in round 2 that we've gotten confirmation that they really liked BB a lot. When we folks just see what your perspective is on this, but when I look at how they run the draft, and sometimes neither you or I get necessarily confused forever waving pom poms, but when you come along to a spot of supporting the organization in the direction they're going or feeling good about the direction that they're going in, when you hear about even little tidbits like that come out where you have this player you look at and you go, man, I really like this guy. If we could find a way to get this guy, and to hear that this is one of those guys they were targeting if they could have found a way to get in the second round, it just does warm your heart that they're going after, not just because we like him as a guy, but this is going to be a good player. That would have been a good pick for them to go find if they could. You feel the same way on that in this draft, but also just on little things like that you hear coming out of this draft about the Hawks?
Yeah, I did like hearing that, of course, because Bebe was a guy who, even going into the draft, most people didn't seem to think much of, but you and me both liked him a lot. I think you had him going in the first, right?
right at the edge. I think
Yeah.
I bounce back and forth. Those guys, you asked me 1 week, and my horizontal board, they'd keep bouncing him a little bit. But he was my favorite guard in the draft.
Yeah, so I just kind of kept waiting for people to get to where we were with him, and it never happened because I
Mm.
had him around there too. I didn't think he was going to go in the first because I didn't see anybody else talking about him like that, but I thought maybe he should,
Yeah.
or maybe he would go at the top of the second. Didn't happen. So I did like to hear that we were into him. That was definitely encouraging. And it does to me indicate that we know that left guard spot is a problem. And I mean, that being said, we didn't do a whole heck of a lot to address it after that. So it does indicate to me that they're aware of the issue. But unfortunately, that might be an issue we just have to live with for 2024.
It's about addressing to me on this. It's just you for so many years not taking the time to understand you got to get it addressed and spend the high picks at getting this stuff addressed, and that's not going to be done overnight when you have neglected it for so long. And this process to me, Brendan, started with the Lucas and Cross pick, and it continues even with being a 4th-round guy in Bradford last year. But coming back around here to the 3rd-round pick, we'll talk about in a second, because the Seahawks did get a nice consolation prize. Okay, maybe they didn't get the Ferrari, Brendan, but maybe got the Lamborghini instead. I think that's how that works, right? Isn't that the pecking order on the cars with that? But so we aren't able to get into the 2nd round. We do come back around the 3rd round then to being able to land Christian Haynes, a man labeled by many as one of the quote unquote safest offensive linemen in the draft. Are you buying that marker here after a deep dive on him? Or much like with Murphy, it sounds like with Murphy, you were pretty reinforced on your opinion coming out from where you were draft day. Same place with Haynes?
Yeah, I was a big fan of Christian Haynes. I do think he was the best right guard in this class. And it's always kind of weird to talk about players like that because we don't know where these guys are going to end up playing. Like, Graham Barton's a great example. We don't know where he's going to actually play. He might end up at right guard. And if he does, I would probably think he's better than Christian Haynes. But if you look at the guys who actually played right guard in college and look like they're going to be right guards in the NFL, he is probably my number one. I liked Mahogany, but not as much as Haynes. And then there was Zinter, who I might have liked more than Haynes, but he got hurt, and I don't think I can put him above Haynes when we don't know how he's going to come back from that injury totally yet. So I was big into Haynes. I really like what I see with him. By the way, another shorty, 9th percentile in height for an interior offensive lineman. So again, I kind of like that better than having these guys who are tall and everyone gets under their pads. This guy's getting under people's pads.
Yes.
So I like that. Tested really well, especially for a right guard. Ran a 5.0340, 175 10-yard split. And I looked at some of the tape from Connecticut, from UConn. That's where he played. A lot of snaps where he's on the move. A lot of snaps where he's, what do they call it when you go around the back of the center and hit a block to like seal the hole
Wham
open?
block.
Yeah, the wham block. A lot of that. Some plays where he's even going out in front of like screen passes. Some plays where he's basically the lead blocker in the hole for the running back. He's like a fullback. A lot of that stuff going on there. So it's not just like, oh, I think he can do it because he's got the athleticism to do it. No, he can do it because we saw him do it. Team captain at UConn as well. So he's got some leadership qualities. Played in 51 games in his career. Basically redshirted his first year, and then he got, I think, an extra year of eligibility because of COVID, because UConn literally played 0 games that year. Near as I can tell, by the way, he did not miss a snap once he took over the starting job in 2019. I think he played every single game and every single snap available to him his entire career after that first redshirt year. So, true of Byron Murphy as well, by the way. So you can see that these guys we're getting, they're going to be out there for you. We can at least say that, right? Because they were out there for you in college.
It speaks to the toughness, because you're always going to have dinged up stuff happen to you, Brendan, right? You got your hand crunched, your knee twisted a little certain way. Ow, that hurts. Do you come off and you're standing on the sideline and checking yourself out, or are you able to get back out there and go the next week if you're a little beat up and and then I think it speaks to that a bit.
Right. And over the last 2 years, 25 games, allowed 1 sack, 2 QB hits and 12 hurries. So really good. By the way, the quarterbacks he's protecting suck. Like I was watching the UConn tape. It's depressed. It's pretty depressing.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to protect those guys too, by the way, because I think he was also a scrambler. Those guys are hard to block for because you don't know where they're going to be.
There's miserable quarterback play, to your point, going on at the college level. I was having the same issue going back looking at Barner at Indiana. And after Penix left in 2022, and whatever guy took over for Penix, whoa. It's just, you go, geez, how did he have a scholarship? You don't be bad, like too hard on the kids, but some of it's brutal tape, man. Watching them quarterback, they are overwhelmed.
Yeah. If I was Barner, I would have transferred too.
Yeah, I would have after that season as well. I don't care about the NIL. Just let me just get into your program, please. Just I need something competent here.
Yeah. According to PFF, most of his run blocking snaps were in zone, but he also had a good chunk in gap. And we talked about this before. We don't totally know what Grubb's going to want to do. Grubb might want to do a good amount of gap stuff as well. He did it. Was it 2 years ago or 1 year ago at UW, where the year that he mostly featured gap, because 1 year it was zone and then the other year it was gap. I remember that, but I can't remember which is which off the top of my head.
Would have been not last year, but the year before then.
Right. So that's good. Also, his athletic profile, and I want to be careful with this. I want to be careful. Athletically, he might be able to play left guard or even center. Now, I'm not saying I want that because we know this guy's an excellent right guard. I would hate to move him off of that and force him into something that he's not comfortable doing and then kind of ruining what we have. But it is possible that this guy could be a left guard because he's a good athlete. He moves really well. And honestly, the thing kind of holding him back would be his size. He's not that big. And I imagine some NFL nose tackles are going to eat him up a little bit. So maybe he does bump over to left. And if so, he becomes even more valuable. So I'm open to it. Should be ready to start day one either way. I'd be very surprised if this guy wasn't starting day one. He's very NFL ready, ton of college experience. Doesn't lack strength either. You would expect a guy this athletic to lack strength. I don't think he does. It's not his greatest asset, but it's pretty good. He's got a ability to finish very powerfully. So there's a lot that I like about this player, and really not that much that I don't like. There's a couple of little technique things, like he leaves his hands wide in pass protection, exposes his chest, but that should be very easy to fix for Scott Huff. Sometimes he leans into contact instead of staying balanced, but easy to fix. Yeah, I really like this player. I'm excited.
I am as well. I mean, this is how you get the label of being the safest interior lineman in this draft. That's for the reasons and a lot of the way he summated his game because of that. It's not because you have a lot of holes in your game, a lot of stuff you need to have fixed. You are a finished product, and that is what the Seattle Seahawks have gotten here. You touch upon his movement in space, and it's such a good thing in him in that he has the athleticism first. He's got the understanding of the timing of it, and he can get there and land those blocks with a tremendous amount of force. You mentioned he does definitely block to the echo of the whistle, and that he will really try to give it to you. He's not just trying to barely do his job, but really finish you. And this works this way when he's getting to those second level blocks or moving out in space, not just trying to get to the block and lay a hat on a hat, but get to the block and drive the golf. If he can get to the block and hit you, and actually he'll try to do that as well. He'll just like old school. You mentioned like a fullback. I think that's an apropos comparison where just like those fullbacks, they'd be running full speed, lower down, and then they try to clear those linebackers out of the hole. It wasn't they lower and then just try to hit him like this. They're going shoulder into those guys, and they were trying to light them up in the hole back in the day. And that's the same thing that he's doing when he is moving out in space. And I love his targeting system is always accurate. He's got that updated NVIDIA. What's the most updated chip right now, Brennan? He's got the, what do we have to 4070, 5060, whatever the hell we're at. You're muted.
Sorry. I think they're still on the 40s. I haven't heard about 50s yet. I haven't been staying super updated with it yet because I'm still on my machine, which is only 3.5 years old, but I think they're still on the 40s.
All right. He's the new 5'10. Okay. He's the
Mhm.
new 5'10 NVIDIA chip with that targeting system. So I love that he can do that because this is what the system is going to ask. I'm looking more and more into the Husky tape from last year and trying to understand a little bit of the sequencing of plays and Grubb. I think you're right about Grubb in that whether he's running zone or the gap stuff, he's going to run different things, a variety of stuff. And those we may be at the forefront with zone. The gap stuff will work into its share of snaps in there, but the movement stuff, the pulling guys in space that he asks his linemen to do, Haynes is going to be comfortable with that day one and sliding into that role. And that's going to be a big part of, I think, his effectiveness as a guard is not just him in the trenches and what he's doing up front, which you mentioned he's got plenty of power in there. His size works a little bit in his favor where he's not Byron Murphy, 6 foot tall guard. He's 6'3", so this is where he gets the leverage win, but maybe he's 2 inches shorter than the average defensive tackle he's going up against. It's not that big of an issue because the strength is enough there to where he doesn't get overwhelmed.
Right.
Let's get to where the rubber meets the road on this one, Brendan. The move to left guard or right guard. And many people are insisting to me at times on a video I've dropped about this in my prediction of how this will bear out. And I think even week one, I believe that Christian Haynes is going to end up as your left guard and Bradford is going to end up as your starting right guard. My belief is for a lot of the reasons that you just mentioned. He's not necessarily a big, typical Damian Lewis right guard type that's your pure 330-ish plus type that's just, he's there to take on those big nose tackles. He is a guy that can move. You mentioned the ability to hold up in pass protection, a little bit of hurries and sacks that he's given up over the course of the years. One of the problems we had with moving Damian Lewis to left guard was that he was having issues in pass protection against nose tackles. How is that not going to get worse once you got him over to 3 techs? This guy, you go, no, he's holding up well with that type of stuff already over there. And also understanding that those same 3 techs that are over there, are going to be a little bit more smaller than the typical nose tackles. So now he's not getting as much of the guy that's going to potentially could overpower him as much. I like the fit over there for him as a left guard long term. Not to mention, I think Bradford comes back and rounds into shape another year with an offseason in the program. And I think Grubb's going to love his athleticism and ability to move in space as well. And the pairing of these two guys to move versus what's the alternative, Brendan? Lakin, Haynes.
Lomia could be a quick learner, I guess, but I'm not super high on that.
That's possible.
Yeah, I think it's probably the right thing to do. It's probably the right thing to do. I guess you could have Bradford at left and then Haynes at right because Bradford's a great athlete too.
Yeah, but that's the problem where I come back to though is that Bradford can't pass protect. He's the guy, he's the Lewis struggling when pass protection against nose tackles. That's that thing that you run back into that same problem, moving him over to left where he's now going to go up against guys, not to mention he's a little bit of a bigger body type. So even though he is athletic, the pass protection stuff is not as fluid for him as an athletic body with Bradford, I would say, as it is with Haynes. And that's what I've heard mentioned too, is that they've got maybe Bradford going over there, but I just think Bradford would struggle over left guard with 3 techs. It'd be a long day at the office for him.
Yeah. I'm trying not to hold what we saw from Bradford last year against him too much because he's so raw. He played like 17 games in college and then he's starting games as a rookie. That was a lot, but, Haynes at left would probably be better than Bradford at left. I tend to agree with that. It makes sense theoretically. I do think that if you do that, there is going to be more of a learning curve for him to adjust because literally this guy played his entire career at right guard. He played every single snap of his collegiate career at right guard. And that's rare. Most of these guys move around a little bit. Like, I think that especially in a smaller college, if you're their best offensive lineman, they just put you at left tackle because they're like, that's our most important position. You're our best offensive lineman. We don't care that you're not equipped to do it. We're just going to put you there and you'll figure it out. Like that's what they did with like Cooper Bebe a little bit, I think, where he's clearly not a left tackle.
Barton as well.
Yeah, Barton. He's clearly not left tackles, but they're like, okay, go out there and figure it out because everyone else on this team is a 1-star recruit at best.
Yeah. I will say this, Brendan, if Bradford's not taking those steps forward and he doesn't meet it up right now, like this next year, like I think he's going to, because I like you said, I'm high on Bradford. It's not that I'm not still high. I just think that him going from being a guy that's like 35 in pass protection last year from the right guard position to growing in his game to being competent as a left guard in that spot is to me a little bit of a road too far. But him growing to a competent spot against nose tackles and pass protection, I completely can see that upside being feasible for him. And that's where I think where I would probably pretty much draw right down the line on that with him. But if he doesn't develop this offseason, I certainly think the draw will be then just have DeLincoln go and then roll with Haynes at that point.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask, did you see his game against Michigan from 2022?
No, I don't
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah, because that was one of the games I watched a cut up of, and I was very impressed because that's Michigan in 2022. So he's dealing with Mozzie Smith, and he's dealing with a really, really good defensive front. And I thought he looked great in that game. That was a game that made me really I'm really into what I'm seeing from him. So I would recommend seeing that game because I thought he looked better in that game than he did even in the game I watched against North Carolina State last year.
That's the one I was watching yesterday, was the North Carolina State from last year. There's a couple of North Carolina States available online I was able to find in the last 2 years, but I will check that one out. To your point, and this comes back to the clean aspect of this prospect. This comes back to why, in my opinion, I think your opinion, this was an A pick. We can get on to the rest of the draft and what our grades would be on it, but when it comes to me, the Murphy in this one, where I go, or just locking on this one, not to try to bring Murphy into it, but it's an A pick. You got the safest interior offensive lineman because when you turn on the tape, you're not getting any bad. The point you make about why they didn't move him, I think, is a valid one. You know, what the reasoning was in there, you know, I'm not certain as well, but whatever tape you turn on with UConn, he's handling his business in pass pro. He's moving in space wonderfully. He's showing off strength and power, natural leverage win most snaps, everything that should translate very well to the NFL level. And a guy that 51 starts, as you said, is ready to go, whether it's left guard or right guard. He's going to be ready to start for you day one, and he will be an upgrade, even day one, rookie year, far beyond what you've gotten from that position recently. And this is how we start to build this offensive line to a strength, even if it's bit by bit.
Mm-hmm. And another thing, when you watch his tape, I'm sure you saw this too. So many plays where he blocks two guys. So many plays where he hits a block on one guy and then goes to block another guy over and over again, which you don't see with some of these other linemen that I was looking at. So I was really happy with that as well.
Yeah, it comes down, there's so many skills you have to bring in to do that type of stuff. It's the timing, the coordination, the athleticism to move in space. Like you're talking about, I think you're inferring kind of like those duo blocks where you start out with the center, you're on the nose, and then you're peeling down into the linebacker and you're getting to the linebacker. And do you have the timing of it? Some of those guys stay on the first block. They can't get down the second block. Sometimes they leave the first block too early and allow penetration because the center's like, dude, I needed more help. And he's got a good understanding of all of that. Just that, I think some of that too comes with Brendan, that 51 starts where the guy's played so much football that he's just very comfortable in understanding how to run the timing of all that. He's done rep after rep in practice. And this is the nice part of getting sort of the flip side of the Bradford type that's only got the 17 starts versus the 51 starts, and how you feel in some of that stuff. It's that just, as I call it sometimes, the wisdom of playing the position stuff that's less about your athleticism and wow factor and just more about the brain stuff a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And, you know, he's good at picking up like exotic blitzes and stuff. So he's got a pretty firm understanding of the cerebral side of the game, which is great because I think he will be a day one starter for us.
I didn't see him get fooled on one blitz in the tape that I watched, to your point. Looping, stunting, or blitzing. He seemed to always be a bit of a step ahead in reading it on the tape I watched with that. And that just goes back to how he's also not given up any kind of real hurries or sacks and pass protection over the past couple of years, because he's not just kind of on it. He's really on it to a fine-tuned level. And I think we did get maybe the best right guard in this draft, just pure right guard. We'll see where all those guys end up finishing their positions out. But just as a pure right guard, you landed it. And a safe point down.
And in that NC State game, he gave up the one sack that he's allowed over the last 2 years. I really think that sack is the quarterback's fault. He like runs right into the defender.
He just, you talked about the position there is just not well played at UConn. It's rough. It's rough to watch. The guy's kind of got that chicken with the head cut off kind of feel to him back there at times. There's not a plan to what he's doing. He's feeling things that aren't there, not feeling things that are there. And NC State was they like to run some games in there at times over the past couple of years on defense, having the linebacker in there, Wilson, you know, they could use him a little bit as a kind of a weapon like that. So it just got the quarterback a bit jumpy. I agree with you. I was more of him kind of running into it a little bit. But he's a really great player, and the Hawks are going to be very happy, I think, with this kid when it's all said and done. And immediately now, when it's all said and done, we don't have to wait on this guy. I think right out the box, he gives you at least league average play year one, which may not sound like much, Brendan, but that's not been exactly a bar we've been able to clear on the interior of our offensive line over the last couple of years at all.
Yeah. And it might be a little better than that. This guy's 24. This guy's an older rookie. He might actually be able to settle in. Like Damian Lewis as a rookie, I think was better than average when he was playing right guard for us. That first year he was above average. So I think this guy could surpass that.
Yep. It's not all linemen in this draft, what I say, are plug and play guys. This is the plug and play guy. And that's what that means with it, is you're getting him on that rookie year to be able to start throughout that whole rookie year deal. Part of the value that brings versus the guy you draft that you have to wait maybe about a season and a half to finally start to get them fully ready to cook and go. Upo, thank you for the $5 donation. I appreciate you for that, Upo. He says, Christian Haynes, Zach Zinter, and Dominic Pooney all drafted within 6 picks. I don't know. Trust in John, though. Go Hawks.
Yeah, well, Zinter, I don't think can be argued over Haynes because I didn't think Zinter was, even when he was healthy, was as good an athlete as Haynes. Like, to me, Zinter was more of a gap scheme guard, and Haynes is a better fit for zone. So even though I liked Zinter a lot, I didn't personally want him on this team because I think this team wants athletes at offensive line. So 100%. Zinter, I kind of threw out a little bit. Pooney's interesting because he plays a much more valuable position at left guard. So that one, I think, is a pretty interesting discussion.
But Pooney was also a tackle in college, right?
I think so.
So Pooney plays right tackle in college. I do believe I remember in watching my assessment of him that I do believe he's going to be a guard long-term. The thing that makes me nervous if I'm the Niners and moving is that I've got to move this guy to that position wholly new. It's one thing to me take a guy as a guard and move him to guard. Another thing to go right tackle him and move you to the toughest guard position. There's guys that have done this. I'm not saying it can't be done. And I do like the Pooney pick of the Niners. That's my favorite pick for them. I think Upo's talking about a little bit too within his question, though, Brendan, something that we did see that was unique in this draft, which was run on players. Run on players where you'd be going around the draft and this hits, and then we had 14 players to start the draft off, offensively speaking, for instance, and then you got a couple of defensive guys that all went, and then we had like he's talking about here, the offensive line. There was a couple of, there was a linebacker run at one point once we did our Tyrese Knight, where a bunch of guys went. A little bit of that happening as well, where John definitely, that's the trusting of John. I think that he's mentioned there, Brendan, is trust John because he grabbed him at the right place where you had to grab, or if you weren't going to grab there, you were in a, oh crap, we missed out on our chance to go get a guy that could start day one and be a league average at least guy with some upside that you talk about, a little bit better than that upside.
Yeah, Pooney's interesting because he's not a very good athlete, but we know from watching the tape that he's good in space. You have players like that, guys who aren't quick or fast or anything, but they're able to hit the target in space regardless. So Pooney was like that. And Zinter's a better athlete than him.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm sorry, Haynes, excuse me.
Yeah, Haynes is a better athlete. And I agree. Your points on Zinter are completely right. He's more of, you want him on the mano, just take his guy and drive him off the ball. Not as much the moving in space stuff. But I think this is also what I would apply to a Satea Lamea thing that, like with Pooney, where Satea didn't necessarily test really great, but you just know from his ability to play out there at right tackle and move around that move into guard and he'll be able to get the job done. Probably, maybe not immediately, but at least long-term, a guy that I think should be able to at least hold up as a very minimum decent backup for you at that position. Though that's a discussion for next week, I suppose, Brendan.
Right.
But yeah, Upo, John was definitely ahead of a lot of runs, it felt like, in this draft at times in taking certain positions where right after he did, you started to feel a bunch of guys taken afterwards of that same position. So it was, I noticed that as well in this draft, kind of an interesting thing watching the position runs where when one GM started to go different from where the river was going and then everybody else started behind him. Like it was kind of like I copy you game or something, telephone.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense why that happens, right? because one pick creates a little bit of a panic. I guess it makes sense.
I certainly think it does. I mean, it's I think in a little bit like, what Byron Murphy did, and then coming back around watching the Rams, then go get Braden Fisk, and then you got Newton goes in there. And, I think that some of these teams did come into this draft a little bit, Brendan, going like the Pooney pick to me to the Niners. Niners came in this draft. You got to come out of this with an offensive lineman. Your fan base is screaming that you lost the Super Bowl because you didn't have a good enough offensive line. And if you don't get Pooney there, it was kind of a dip at that point. You were going to be in no man's land at that point. If you're the Niners coming back around to the fourth round, hoping you're going to get a guy that could come in there and be a player to start or be in the mix to start for you the upcoming season. So that's where I say we landed that right spot where to get a guy that can start day one with some upside. And one of the safer, quote unquote, safer guard picks in the draft, get that at that spot in the draft just before other teams definitely would have jumped on. If we didn't take him, Brendan, he's going to probably the Niners, or he's going to a team very quickly if we do pass.
Definitely.
Thank you though, Upo, for the $5 donation and trusting John. I'm doing the same as well, man. You're going to earn my trust when you make so many smart decisions back to back. And this is the third draft minimum in a row that's been very smartly run.
Right. I agree.
Barry Soy Toro with a $20 donation. And Barry, it's got you back to back with two $20 donations. So thank you for those two $20 drops. Nothing posted in your note there with the $20 dono, but thank you, man, for that support to the channels. Really, really, really appreciate it. Very, very kind of you, man.
Thank you.
It's good to see you in the chat too, bro. Hope you're having a great night. All right, well, let's keep it moving here. With Haynes, you do see him starting day one.
I'd be very surprised if anything else happened, especially with how it's not like we've got a lot of established veterans that we feel really good about at that interior offensive line.
Give me in the best season of Christian Haynes' career, what is his PFF overall score going to be?
If you leave him at right guard or if you move him to left guard? I think
Both.
It changes. Okay. Right guard, I think he could get up to like 88 or 89.
Ooh, okay.
Because he's so comfortable with doing that stuff. It's comes so naturally to him to play that role. Move him to left guard, I'm going to say like 81.6. I do think that there's a little bit of a learning curve there. I think that it's harder to do, but I'm going to say 81.6. I think he's good enough to do it really well. Maybe not at like an all-pro level, but he'll be really good.
And you have a good amount of confidence in both of those projections in it, not being the guy can get it, but it's going to take a lot for him to get to that upside kind of thing.
No, not really. I mean, my biggest problem with him is just little technique things that he probably got away with at UConn most of the time because they're playing mostly lesser teams. Although, actually, UConn does play a lot of pretty good competition. I was surprised going through it.
They mix it in. They mix it in a little bit more than some of those other small schools will sometimes do. To your point on that, I like his upside too. I see him as kind of a low 80s guy, a PFF guy. I do anticipate the move to left guard. I do think he could maybe be a smidge better at right guard, but that the value to have finally a guy at left guard that's actually not just kind of holding on for dear life over there is just too much of a draw at the end of the day over the pure little bit of that smidge of extra upside you get with the move to the right guard from the left guard position. So day one starter, got a lot of upside. If Lucas's knee can just lock in a good way, not lock out, lock in, and this Haynes kid sets and Oluwatimi can get in there and you got Cross, at the very worst case scenario, we're looking to just need to get the left guard position figured out. And even in that worst case, you've got good depth and at some of these positions where you're standing at. So let's keep it moving here, Brendan, to the fourth round here, where we made two selections in the fourth round after we traded back. Mm-hmm. And the first one is one that Brendan still for me remains the tough one for me to quite still get my head of all the picks in this draft. It's still the toughest one that I have. If I was trying to chew on this bone, I still wouldn't have gotten to the marrow, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Tyrese Knight of UTEP. It is a tough one. I kind of feel like what happened was that we made that trade back with Denver. I think we moved back like 20 spots to pick up another 5th-round pick or something like that. It's pretty decent trade in a vacuum, but I think we missed on our hopes with that trade back of still having a linebacker that we really liked available there, like Cedric Gray. I think we made that trade back hoping that Gray would still be there when we picked, and he wasn't. And that kind of sent us into that little bit of that mentality that you're talking about with the run on a certain position. Where it's like, well, we need a linebacker now. I suspect that they decided that Jeremiah Trotter's too small, because I do think that Macdonald wants bigger defenders. That's kind of the impression I'm getting based on what I've seen from him so far. We've got plenty of time to figure out if that's actually the case or not, though. But I suspect it. Not that Tyrese Knight's very big, by the way. I'm just going to put that out there. Not that he's that much bigger. He's bigger. He's not that much bigger. But you end up going with the guy who is there that you like the best. And in that case, that is Tyrese Knight. So, it is a little bit of a tougher sell, I think, looking at him. It's hard to find tape on this guy, by the way. UTEP doesn't exactly have a... the only game tape I was able to pull up was from Oklahoma 2 years ago. And it's not good tape, by the way. It really isn't. He was not good in that game, I don't think. My initial impression of him is that his best asset is his ability to shoot gaps into the backfield and make plays in the backfield, which surprises me. I kind of thought that would be the thing that Macdonald was deprioritizing, and he wanted somebody who would more be able to hold up against blockers, take on blockers, stack and shed, and kind of just, that Junior Colson thing where Junior Colson makes no plays in the backfield. Junior Colson doesn't know what the backfield looks like because he's never in the backfield, but he keeps everything in front of him, and he's making plays around the line of scrimmage. So I'm a little bit surprised that he would go for a gap shooter, because other than that, there isn't a heck of a lot else here, right? He is quick. He does have pretty good speed, but I don't think he's a great athlete. He's got great straight line speed, right? He's really good in a straight line, but as an athlete, it's okay. He's a good blitzer, but again, that's another thing I didn't think Macdonald would be prioritizing all that heavily. He is a good tackler, I will say that, and he's very durable. That's nice. But there's a lot that is kind of missing here. The coverage, I think he'll be okay in zone. Probably going to get beat up in man. Not that we're terrified of that, because it's mostly going to be zone around here. Doesn't really have great instincts. He guesses a lot. When he gets it right, great. But when he gets it wrong, it's bad, right?
He's really off.
Yeah, he's a freelancer. He freelances a little bit. Doesn't seem like he's got all the instinctual and football IQ things down yet. Not very strong. If a blocker gets on him, he's probably going to kick his butt, because most guys that block him are going to be much stronger than him. And he's just out of position a lot. So I see a good player somewhere in here for sure, but I do think we wanted to come away with a better linebacker in this draft, and we played with a little bit of fire with that trade back, and we got burned on it. I will admit that.
We got stuck as the caboose on the run, Brendan.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Macdonald, because that was the thing I mentioned in my initial evaluation on draft day with him, was that the instincts were a part of those. All the things you said are the things I've seen on tape myself, but that was something I got blowback from a little bit on, just a tiny degree, was that, well, Mike Macdonald said he actually has really great instincts on what he saw on tape. And like you said with this, and I think it's the thing we've got to mention to the audience on this with the evaluation on Tyrese, is that we don't have access to all the UTEP tape. So some of this has got to be based a bit on just the small bit of sample size that we have, comparatively speaking, to some of these other prospects that we've got a big amount of tape to go off of. But the instinct stuff was kind of there where it's lacking, where he's guessing, he's misdirected, he's fooled. He's not always, just in on and on it with those little details of things. I was wondering if maybe there was a little bit of this that was coming into play, Brendan, where they were going to turn him into the kind of the Kyle Van Noy role within the defense. of what the Ravens did last year. When I looked back at the snap counts on Tyrese Knight, they did take down his edge snaps this past year a little bit, but the prior 3 years than that, they had him with like 50 edge snaps a season, which doesn't seem like a lot, but then pair that, Brendan, with the amount of snaps they had him in the slot, where he has 100 additional snaps every one of those years in the slot as well. So that means we got 150 snaps where he's either lined up as an edge or as a slot defender. And so that's a little bit of like that kind of Kyle Van Noy role where it's like sometimes he's kind of coming as an edge, but then he's in this sort of no man's land, like middle territory kind of place. And that's where I go, okay, well, then the plan makes a little more sense to them because you are having him go down more hill. He can dip and get around, like you said, as a blitzer. That's the thing that stands out. Is he's got the initial nice first step quickness to get back there, but then a little bit of dip. So maybe they like a little bit of his ability to come off that edge if he's playing in kind of that role. And sometimes Van Noy would be more like an off-ball linebacker and how you'd have him. That's the value of him is you can kind of move him all over the place. Maybe that's where they're looking at going with him.
Yeah, I could see that. I could also see him developing. Like he could learn, he could get better. I don't think that's unreasonable. He's probably not got the best coaching at UTEP, right? He's not surrounded by the greatest amount of talent at UTEP. No. So he could get better, but I do like that idea conceptually of maybe playing him on the edge. Yeah, he played 50 snaps as an edge rusher in 2022 and then 50 in 2021. I have that as well. And then I think it was like 40 in 2020 is what I have here actually. Would have been 50 if it wasn't the COVID year probably because they played 8 games.
Right. But then they changed. It's just that they changed him this past year a little bit in that role. They took those snaps away a bit.
Yeah, well, it seemed like this last year he got better because suddenly he became a really good gap shooter. He was making plays in the backfield constantly. Maybe they just were like, okay, let's let it ride now in this role because he's better at it. And he was still generating, he averaged more than 1 pressure a game. So he was still generating pressure without playing on the edge.
So there we go. And they definitely would blitz him at times on the tape I did watch. So there's probably a little bit of that built in that, just kind of maybe finding him. I'm with you. Maybe there's some development here with it. It's just the 2 things I always worry about the linebacker. It's like those base skills you worry about in each player, every position, Brendan. Like a receiver that can't catch or a quarterback that's missing arm strength. I'll always worry a little bit in this modern era with a linebacker where you worry a little bit about the instincts and then the coverage stuff to me with him in zone and locating people in zone and picking up the right guys and having just any kind of a plan of attack of what he's doing when he drops into zone. There is sometimes a little bit of some echoes in there of a Jordan Brooks type at times on those, some of the snaps I watched with him in that spot.
Yeah, I could see some of that as well. His cover numbers when he was in college were not Jordan Brooks tier. Like last year, I think he got targeted 32 times in 12 games, gave up 255 yards. Like I can live with that. Like that's not awful. I think he had 1 year. I'm taking a look here. Oh yeah, 2021 was the year he really got beat up in coverage. But the last 2 years, it's been manageable. Like I don't think you're doing all that badly if you have an inside linebacker playing as much as he is, getting targeted like 2 to 3 times a game. That's not terrible.
No, if he can keep down the targets down on there, but I think a lot of times he just wasn't getting his picked on as much as what you're feeling from the zone drops where there's guys open in space and he's just, he's not covering a guy. He's just sort of and guys are running free. So that's that competition you go back to with UTEP too, and the quarterbacks, level of quarterbacks they're playing against and what they could see and can't see. But got to come back to again. It's always what we're saying with this guy over and over that hard to say with him when you don't have quite as much tape to go through as I typically would like to go through on some of these guys.
Yeah, I will say this. When I watched the Oklahoma game, which is probably the game you saw too, because that's like the only game in town.
Yeah.
I thought he looked very tentative. Like he looked very passive to me. Like he was very unsure of whether or not, should I go? Should I go? Should I go? And it seems like that got a lot better in 2023. So I do think there's a strong possibility here that he drastically improved in regards as a player in 2023. And if that's the case, then okay, I can see it a little bit more. But yeah, the thing that really stuck with me about that 2022 tape is how many times he had a chance to maybe just, plant and go upfield to go make a play. And he was just he looked a little scared.
Yeah. The Oklahoma tape was brutal for me. And that was after the draft for me. I saw that for the first time as I've been watching the other tape. And that one was just, oof. But There's a reason these guys aren't, young guys. They're not affixed. This is not their final state. They're prospects. Give them that room to grow. And this is supposed to be the position, especially that Mike Macdonald really resonates with in being able to teach. So that's the part you feel. And hey, you don't have to have him. You're not forcing him to come in and start early on as a fourth rounder either, with having the two starters in place. So
Right.
we should have a lot of reason the ground should be fertile for this kid to come in and be able to, whatever there is for him to develop into. He won't have any excuses to say, well, I was rushed on the field too fast, I wasn't ready, or I didn't have the good coaching for a guy that could teach the position properly. Check. He'll be fine on all those markers.
Yeah. So not as much as I'd like to be able to say about him, because there just isn't that much out there. But overall, I think there is some potential there. He's very fast. He's very quick. But are instincts something that you can teach? That's kind of the question. Can you teach instincts in the NFL?
That's the part that I have a hard time with, Brendan, because I just don't know of a recent representation of a player who, watching him on college, the instincts were missing to a greater degree where it stood out, where I'm going to write it down in my notes that this is missing, that you got him to the pro level and those instincts started to suddenly show up. If you got it in partial or you got it in flashes, but that's again our difference of evaluation from where even Macdonald was talking about on draft day, because their evaluation was that they saw him and they thought that there was these great instincts, or that there was this, he's a step faster on it. And hopefully they're seeing it right in that way versus our outlook on it, because I don't think so. It's like, that's why I make the reference of it to a quarterback with arm strength or a receiver in catching. To me, if a receiver has a bad hands coming out of college, I don't think those hands get better at the pro level. I don't think, he'll just go out there and work on the jugs machine and he'll be great in a year. No, probably always going to be fighting his hands a little bit. Yeah. There's certain things that I think just kind of come with the package, Brendan. You just either, there's things you can improve. There's other things that are kind of set.
Yeah, you may be correct.
But will be fun to watch how they potentially use Tyrese, how he develops, what position they end up kind of slotting him into when it's all said and done. It's good to hear they got him kind of more at the will initially early on to get him around the blocking stuff, and how they're going to play him a little bit here, I think, early. Because that is a part that he's got to work on too, is getting off the blocks, hand usage, how to deal with it, have a little bit of a plan on handling those. But will help him out a little bit in that spot. So where do you see his upside? Final upside look with Tyrese?
Oh, that's tough. I think he's talented enough to have pretty good upside. I think he could be. Man, I'm trying to think of a comp here. I'm struggling to, because the thing is, the player that he is right now is not really the player we want him to be, right? Like in a perfect world, he becomes completely different from the player we see right now. So that's hard. I think he could be like a starter, but not an especially good one, if I had to guess. Like, I do view him kind of in that lens, and he's a fourth rounder. It's okay if he's never becomes a great starter.
Yeah, I kind of foresee the same sort of thing at this point. Probably more of a Cody Barton than a Bobby Wagner, or more a Cody Barton than a KJ Wright. How about that? We'll say that as the
something
way
like that. Yeah,
some more along those lines. But still, a lot of room here to be hopeful. And again, didn't have a lot of the tape all the way through like on this one, so you got to go where you got to go with it. We got a $14 donation from Code Dad. Thank you for the $14 donation super sticker. Nothing put into your comment, just the donation. I thank you for that. Very kind of you, Code Dad. Guys, really do appreciate, and girls, all the support to the channel. If you guys could for me too, please, whether you're watching this on Brendan's side or on the Hawks Nest side, hit that like button if you could. It does help out both of our channels tremendously. Sub on up if you get a chance to. We wouldn't be the least bit mad if you did so. Let's move on to our last outlook of prospect today, Brendan. The final guy taken in the fourth round before the Seahawks moved on into the fifth here, and we'll chop this show up into kind of two parts into next week, doing the second part of this. But another guy that I don't think you were super high on in draft day in your outlook of him. So another guy that would be interested to see where you're at after your deep dive was done with him a little bit. And this is going to be the late fourth round pick the Hawks took of A.J. Barner out of the University of Michigan.
I would say my impression of him improved probably a little bit. I kind of came away from it thinking, what would this guy have done in a more high volume passing attack, right? Because Michigan, you're you can't find a more run happy team out there. Like they might run the ball more than Yale. Mm-hmm.
Seriously, Army with their
triple
option.
Yeah, triple option or wishbone. Like they may as well be one of those teams with how little they throw the ball. So I'd say my impression of him improved probably a little bit. I still wonder if you could have gotten a little bit more of a dynamic tight end. I wonder if you could have gotten somebody who offered a little bit more in the passing game. Like I still like Cade Stover a lot. I still like him a little bit more than Barner overall. But I think what happened is that you wanted to specifically target a blocking tight end because Pharaoh Brown's on a 1-year deal. So you're thinking about life after Pharaoh Brown. You know that Noah Fant's not much of a blocker. He's a little better than we thought, but he's still not really good at it. And you want to use him in a very particular role. You want him to catch passes for you. And if Westover's part of the future, he's too small to block. He's a Jacob Hollister type. So Barner is a guy who comes in and should immediately be a very good blocker. And by next year should be an excellent blocker at the position. He's big. He's got good size. Blocking is kind of what he has experience doing because he played so many games last year for the Wolverines who run the ball a ton. And I do think in that capacity, he is a very good player. He's a tight end that has experience lining up in line, which is really getting rare these days. So many of these tight ends do not know how to line up in line. And even really good ones like Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts, I don't think he lined up in line very much in college, and he barely does it in the pros. And when he does, he's not very good at it. So having somebody who can actually line up as a true tight end and just run block, it means something. He's a technically sound blocker. He's got a good punch to halt momentum from pass rushers and defenders in general. He's athletic enough to handle zone blocking assignments, I think. He's not a great athlete for the position, but it should be fine for blocking purposes at least. Really good assisting tackles with chip blocks and combo blocks and stuff like that. So he's got that stuff going on. And I do think he'll be a chain mover. He's got a really good feel for how to find the hole in the zone and sit down in it. You know, he's not going to drift into the zone coverage. He's not going to lead the quarterback into the coverage. He's also really good on broken plays, just finding a way to help his quarterback out when the quarterback's running for his life. He's a big target because he's got long arms and he's tall. So there is definitely stuff to like here. And I do think that in the capacity we are drafting him in, which is as a blocking tight end, he will do very well. I don't think we'll be disappointed there.
Yeah, I do believe everything you said is right on the point with the blocking, and that this is a guy with a lot of high upside blocking, which is not the most sexiest of skills to be looking for in players. But, and especially a player that you more look for, I think what they do as a pass catcher first and foremost, but it can't be undersold how important it is. Grubb's going to want to run his 12 personnel quite a bit. I think even more so than some fans think, Brendan, a little bit, where they think a spread concept's coming out there and it's going to be all 3 wide receivers and 4 wide receivers. And I think you're going to get a lot of mixture of 12 personnel. Grubb doesn't just stick in one thing and just kind of live in one area of things. He's even different than like the Rams attack in that way, where the Rams at times will live in 11 personnel. And they don't, and they'll flip between that and 14, but he'll stay flipping between a variety of different things. So there's room for Barner to find a place on the field immediately next year. I think the 2 tight end packages between him and Brown in the immediacy, I think, Brendan, are going to be nasty. You have 2 guys that Pharaoh Brown's one of the better blocking tight ends in the sport. Barner's got a potential, I think, to become that as well. Those are 2 guys now that could neutralize edges on their own. When you're talking about wanting to pull offensive linemen in space as often as Grubb is going to want to pull offensive linemen in space, that means that you're going to need to have those guys coming down like on a pin and pull block where a tight end comes down and pin and pulls the edge. He's got to be able to land that pin and pull and hold it. Not long. You don't ask those guys to take them and drive them off the ball, right, Brendan? Because it's like a pitch play. It's just to get the guy sealed essentially, but you got to hold the seal. And he can do that type of stuff. Pharaoh can do that type of stuff. I still don't know where to land on him. And I still feel like where he sits as far as a pass catcher and his ability as a pass catcher, I don't think that the story is fully well written there yet. I don't think I can necessarily come out, Brendan, and say, I see great upside in his ability as a pass catcher. But I was watching, for instance, this cut up of the 2022, just even today, a little bit more, just double back down on it, just watching these throws again and really locking in on it. after Penix left at Indiana, before he went to Michigan the year before, where he was essentially his most highly targeted point at that point in his career. You know, that was where over his time in college, Brendan, that was the spot where he was having the most times having, you know, the ball thrown to him. And so many throws that were just horrible throws, nowhere close to giving him an opportunity or a chance, and making catches on what he was given a chance. And he brings that tight end traditional thing of, I can do the contact catch thing. You said moving chains. I think that's a good way of putting it, where he can get there, sit in the zone, make the catch, take the contacted catch, take the hit right after he makes the catch, still hold on, and be that guy that you can trust on that side of it. So he does give you, I think, a little more pass catching upside rather than, let's say, Farrell Brown. Did you see that Farrell Brown training session he did on Twitter? Like, he put a little cut up and everybody was like, don't ever ask this man to run any routes. he was doing this super slow stutter kind of move. You're muted.
Sorry about that. He beat Sauce Gardner for a touchdown last year.
Well, I know, but Sauce is so overrated.
Well, yeah, I do think there could be a little bit of upside there. He's got tiny hands. He's got like 3 percentile hands. It's 9 inches. I do wonder if that limits his upside as like a sure-handed target a little bit. And doesn't always. Like a guy we might talk about next week a little bit, Hayden Hatton, has small hands, but his hands are excellent. Like he's got ridiculously good hands, actually. But I do look at AJ Barner's hands and I'm like, there might be a little bit of a ceiling there. I don't think he's a great route runner. His cuts are not sharp. He rounds his cuts off a little bit. But I do like his catch radius. I do like the catch radius that he presents to a quarterback. He's really good at making defenders miss and breaking tackles. He's not fast or quick or anything like that, but he does have this open field upside to him where it always feels like he's getting a few extra yards.
Yeah, I think it gives you that just a little bit of that. Like I said, I don't want to overstate this, Brendan, to make it seem like he's got some big monstrous upside to him. And I was trying to go and look, and I can't bring up the stat here or find it readily right now, but I think his drop rate was pretty good. Yeah. So he's at like, when he was even at the, you know, when you go to like the big season where he was targeted the most, which would be the 2022 season where he had 49 targets and only 28 receptions. And you look on the surface of that and you go, okay, well, it would seem like maybe the hands are a problem factoring into that. But then when I look at the tape, for instance, today on that very season, and there's so many overthrows and everything else that's on that tape where it's not his fault. He's just not being thrown good targeted balls. And this matches back then to the drop rate, which is about 3% that year on his drop rate. So in the tape that I did watch on him, he caught it when it was thrown to him. He's not being given a high volume of catchable passes over the course of his career. So this is sample size city all the way.
Yeah.
But this is that part I come back to saying that I think you get a bit of a Will Disley here prior to Disley's injury, not the older Disley after the 2-leg injuries, but the prior to the 2-leg injuries Disley, where there's actually a little bit of maybe upside here. And there's a lot of tight ends that have come through this league. I'm not saying he's this guy, but there's a lot of tight ends that have come in this league, Brendan, that weren't utilized a lot in college, that were blockers, quote unquote. And then they got to the NFL level and they went, oh, he can actually catch a whole lot of pass. Like no one thought Sam Laporta was going to come out with the season he did. No one thought George Kittle was going to lay to bear what he did. George Kittle wasn't a first round. If that was a 5th round guy, the guy went in the same round as Disley did, right? A couple picks before Disley. So, you know, these guys can sometimes fall through the cracks because they're just not featured in that way in the college level, but yet they have that upside nonetheless.
Yeah, I have over his career 104 targets and 5 drops, which on the surface of it sounds totally fine. 5 drops on 104 targets is totally something you're willing to live with. Now, a lot of those targets, like you said, were nowhere near him, right? A lot of those targets were like 8 yards over his head or, you know, in the dirt, a 2-hopper. So it's not so much the drop rate. I'm not saying I don't know about his hands based totally on the drop rate. I'm looking at the fact that they're small. And I'm also looking at the fact that the 1 year that he was targeted, excuse me, let me put it to you, targeted by a competent quarterback last year with McCarthy, which was 2023, of course. I have, I think, 3 drops on 32 targets is what I wrote down here. So it's not terrible. It's definitely not. But I don't think he has elite. I don't think he'll have great hands. I'll put it to you that way. They'll be fine.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be a guy. I don't necessarily think he'll be going up there and mossing people right and left. But I as I say with this, it's less to me saying that I know he's got the upside to catch, is more saying there may be some potential here, and that we don't know his upside yet as a pass catcher fully. What you said about the routes, I think, is completely fair. He's not going to be a precise, exact route runner in that way. He'll sit in the zones in the right space. I think the hands part I feel good about because the skill of his catching that I see. He's a guy that is willing to catch out away from his body. There's a cut up in the Indiana game against Ohio State, where he's going against a really, good level defender at that point. And he goes up and just goes right over the top of the guy on a fade route to the back of the end zone. When the team really needed a touchdown that game, they're down 21-0 at that point. And he goes down and makes a really tough catch on not the greatest of throws. So it's just that I think there could be a little bit more there. It may not be. It may end up coming to find that it is limited to the side, and that this is the problem with going off sample sizes. It's hard to make determinations one way or the other because you want more of the extra data and more of the extra targets and all that on his tape to make this kind of determination. But I have a little bit more hope for him on that. Being that when I saw him targeting that way, Brendan, he made the catches when he had the chances. Being that there has been these tight ends that have come through in recent years that have kind of fallen down this line of path in the way of their development, and yet finding some success at the NFL level that not as many people saw because NFL teams are like us. They want to feel warm and comfy with all the extra production and targets and stuff.
Right. So overall, I think it's very clear what you're getting with Barner. I think it's very clear. And I would be very surprised if he didn't live up to that, right? Like he's a blocking tight end with a little bit of chain moving catchability on the side. And I think he's huge percentage of the time he gets there as a pro.
Yeah. Agree. I think that you're at least you're saying you feel good about where his floor is going to be.
Yeah, I can't imagine him being a poor blocker in the NFL. That would be very surprising to me.
No. This guy gets after it. He moves people off the ball. He's got the strength and power and technique to do it. It ain't just one of those that he's leaning on the other. It's all together, and it will translate, Brendan. Like you said, this is a harder skill you would think to find the NFL than you would think. You can find the guys coming out tight ends, Brendan, that like to catch, right? We can find those guys all across the board, but find the guys that can get in line, take a defensive end or an edge, and truly be able to take those guys on a ride as a blocker is a harder skill set to find in this modern era.
Yeah, it is getting tough. This stuff is tough to find because you don't get paid a lot of money when you're a great blocking tight end. You get paid a lot of money when you catch the touchdowns.
It's true. It's true. And it's also hard to get in there sometimes, man. You got to be brutal and get in there and be mean with it. And you got to try to, root out guys that are strong and powerful. And, takes a certain kind of mindset, I think, too, which pass catcher to that mindset don't exactly always come together, eclipse, so to speak. So you sort of tend to get one or the other on that, Brendan.
Yeah. He's only 251 right now, pounds. Probably going to have to add a little bit of weight, and he's got the frame for it. He's 6'6". But I think Dissly played a little heavier than this when he was playing. So if that's the comp, I do think Barner has to add a little bit of weight.
Yeah. I mean, Dissly was 263 at the combine, I think, and Barner came in at 251. So, I mean, to me, when you're within 9 pounds of a guy, it's, I think he can get there. We've seen with Parkinson. I think Parkinson came out of the draft at 240. He was up to by the end at 260. I don't think there's anything in his build that says he can't add on another 10 pounds of good weight on there, and not be, supremely hold him back or be a problem or an issue for him at that point. So, yeah, I don't think it'd be an issue. Dissly was also coming from defensive line, so he was also coming out naturally heavier from the position he was at prior at UW for the majority of his time.
Yeah. Very true.
Roxanne, thank you for the $10 donation. I appreciate you for that, Roxanne. She says, when we drafted Will Dissly, everyone called him a blocking tight end. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that was really one that got away because he was going to be like our Jason Witten, I think. I think he would have been that prolific as a receiving tight end, and then he got hurt twice, and it was over.
Yeah, I think this is exactly, it's a good timing, by the way. Thank you, Roxanne, for the donation, but it's good timing on just what I'm talking about. I was thinking about Kittle, but certainly Disley fits into this realm as well. And there's a couple other guys, Brendan, we could go through in recent history, and like Dallas Goedert, like he wasn't tremendously productive as a pass catcher, I don't think, coming out of college. But he's been rounded into form fine as a pro in a way that he didn't necessarily show in the college level. And these tight ends sometimes just don't get used that way. But yeah, the tough part with Disley, and this is the part that I want to lead really with Barner, that I think is the spot to really lock in, and is just when you have so little to go off of on their use in that realm of the game, it makes it that much harder to predict exactly where they're going to fit into, and on both sides of the scale, where it could be to a place of doesn't really give you much as a pass catcher, just an occasional chain mover guy, but he's in there to block, essentially becomes a Pharaoh Brown, versus the guys that can be like a Kittle or Disley before he went down to those 2 injuries Brendan was just talking about, who actually looks like they have this total package upside they can offer to you from the tight end position. And it's kind of a wide range that you can get, but I'd say that there is a range of this kind of offered from some of these tight ends that fall into these kind of parameters. You say that's fair, Brendan?
Yeah, it can totally happen. It's there. You can even you can make a very good argument for it too, because of how little an opportunity he had to be a good receiver in college football.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not just projecting a bunch of stuff that doesn't exist.
Yeah, no, it's about the factors that are outside their control. And if there's something outside their control, it's not about their development or whatever. It's like, well, you're in Michigan's offense that wants to, not pass the ball in the second half of this Penn State game, but 0 times. It'd be hard for me to show how prolific a catcher I can be with the ball, especially in that final year where I'm taking that biggest jump and leap of my development, where you're going to see me at my best. And then pair that in with him there in Michigan, Brendan. The thing I like to mention too is that tight end there that they've got, he's the first round pick next year. He may not be.
His name kept coming up when I was watching Barner tape. I'm trying to remember what it was now.
Loveland.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Loveland's not going to be Bowers, but he'll be in the 20s.
He'll be like a Hawkins. Well, maybe not Hawkinson. Hawkinson was almost top 10.
Yeah, well, that's right. No, but a fan.
Eric Ebron was up there, right?
Ebron's a top 12er, I think.
Yeah, he's good.
So it's just another guy that it's not his fault. He couldn't necessarily overtake that guy. If that guy's gonna be a first round pick, it doesn't mean that he's just chopped liver at that point. It's like, well, you aren't one of the, few first round tight ends we've seen come through over the last 10 years. you're dog trash. Like, nah, it's just, I'm still got something to offer with it on that side of it. It'll be fun to watch where he lands though, Brendan, on this one. I do think there is some stuff there, and this is why I like the kid so much coming out. Is like, man, there might be something here that you have to squint really hard to see, and you got to do a lot of extra advanced math to get to the end of it on that upside that might foreseeably be there. But I feel like it could foreseeably be maybe there just based on some of the stuff. Mm-hmm. Roxanne, thank you for the $10 donation. Great thoughts as well on this subject. Completely agree. Randall McDaniel, thank you for the $5 donation. Appreciate you for that, Randall, as well. Says, besides Byron Murphy, which rookie has the best chance to hit? Oh, I think this was an easy one, huh?
Yeah, I would be very surprised if Haynes didn't become a good starter. At the very least, like a 68 PFF grade player. And I would expect more than that, but it would be very surprising to me if Haynes wasn't like a 10-year starter in this league.
Yeah, I would agree with this, Randall. The 51 starts at the college level. The unanimous way that you hear him talked about from guys like even Charles Nagy, who runs the Senior Bowl, and speaking to how pro-ready this guy is, how you'll hear when you get guys like Bradford coming out last year of 17 college starts, and boy, you can't deny the physical potential, but he's just really raw. You hear from the people that talk about raw, but with this on the other side of it, you hear in very much the opposite to Haynes. Everything is ready to go. Everything technically is in the right spot. Me and Brendan have watched over endless amounts of tape of Haynes, and we keep coming away from every bit of it going, I can't find really any real glaring bad spots to his game that would upend him even initially as a rookie. So I think that he's got not only, I think, to say the second best chance to Murphy, I'd say even has maybe a better chance than Murphy, because Murphy is going to be a backup here. I mean, he's not, you're not going to put Williams as your nose tackle and Murphy out there as your 3 tech. There'll be some times you run that package, but you're going to have Reed out there and Williams and then Murphy mixing in, whereas Haynes is going to be starting day one out there and cooking for you out there day one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's I don't think there's really any bust potential with Haynes. I would be shocked if he busts. Murphy, I think it's unlikely, but I think it's more likely than Haynes. To me, Haynes is a very firm, high floor guy.
Yeah, agreed. 100% agreed. So I think he's almost got the best chance to hit, whereas Murphy's got maybe that highest upside kind of spot to him. I'd look at, I guess, with it, Randall. That was an easy one. The rest after that, I don't know. It's that after that it gets tough, doesn't it, Brendan? If you're going, who's got the third best chance? It's we feel we got an A on these first two, but then after that you go,
yeah,
DJ James in the slot.
Yeah, I really like Pritchett, but I still wouldn't say he's got the better chance to hit than Haynes.
No, I meant of the remaining. So if we had to pick the remaining, you go Tyrese Nice, AJ Barner, Satu Lamea, DJ James, Nehemiah Pritchett. You know, who's got the best chance to hit of any of those? Because it's so with Murphy and to me Haynes, there's a bit of a not a certainty with those two guys, but there's a bit of like, okay, these, you know, you feel good about, you know what they're going to do here on it. Those the other ones. There's a little bit of a, well, is Barner just a blocker? Is Nehemiah Pritchett not able to tackle well enough? And kind of DJ James just a slot guy? Can he overtake Witherspoon that slot role? You know, gets a little bit harder.
Yeah. Again, I really like Pritchett, and I think Lomia is going to at least be a good backup. I'll say that. Yeah. Like maybe he doesn't become a starter, but he'll be somebody that you're happy to have on your roster.
Agreed. I think I like LeMay a lot on that side of it. DJ James will probably be my guy just by how many people you see talking him up that we're talking about before the draft. And I think when you start to think a little bit more about him as a slot versus when I was watching the first time through on the tape, and we'll talk about him a little bit more next week on this one, but a guy that when you think about him more as just a slot only guy where, oh, okay, well, maybe this is really just his best pure fit. Mm-hmm. And then the upside starts to look a little bit better from my perspective on him because of that.
Right.
Thank you, though, Randall. Appreciate the $5. Great question on your part. Randall also with a $2 donation says, how many rooks get a second contract with the Hawks? Over, under 2.5. He chose the Vegas number on that one on us for him. Then. The 2 was easy. If you went 1.5, you're like, oh, all day on the over on that.
I think I still go over because I would say Murphy, Haynes, and Barner probably get the second contract because Barner's not going to be that hard because he's probably going to be a blocking tight end, and those guys aren't super expensive most of the time.
Yeah.
And it's not like we have a lot of long-term money tied up into tight end, right? Fant will be gone by then. Brown will be gone by then in all likelihood. And then I think that Murphy will be good enough to get a second contract, although those interior defensive lineman contracts are going crazy right now.
They are.
And I think Haynes will be kind of money in the bank to bring back.
Yeah, I think that's where I would take the over on this too, Randall. Not as much as the confidence in the final guy that pushes it over too, but in the confidence of Murphy and Haynes to be what they are and the certainty that what they're going to bring. That just gives you 2 right out the gate. So can we get one more from the remaining 5 or 6 picks? I think we can. Yeah. And I don't think it's going to necessarily where there's a Barner type pick or something along those lines. It's not necessarily going to have to be some big, huge second contractor guy that's massively hit to be that third guy. So my prediction would be yes. I think a third guy does get. I don't know which the third guy is going to be, but I do think that you'll walk out of this draft long term with 3 guys on this team in the next 5-6 years in the way that it all structures. But that's really Randall on the back of those first 2 picks and how strongly, at least I feel about those 2 guys and where they're going to land in the future.
Mm-hmm. I dig it.
Appreciate it, Randall. Thank you for the double dip, man. Hope you're having a good one tonight. Benson DeWalt, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, appreciate you guys keeping us informed. Go Hawks. Well, thank you, Benson. Very kind of you as well. And it's been, I'm sure, to speak for Brendan on this one. I don't like to do that often, Brendan. When we do it on this one, it's been our pleasure. We love doing this coverage, you guys, and love the fact you guys are as into this. And there is a market for this, for us to be able to dive this deeply into these drafts and look at these guys this closely. It's a big part of what we love to do about our channels on this. So thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it, and the donation on it. But it's been our pleasure, I think. I can say.
Thank you, Benson. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Very kind of you. Very kind of you. Well, those are our four main guys here we're going to look at this week, Brendan, and we will turn this page over next week to kind of finish up things with the last of this draft next week and the UDFAs of note that we want to talk about in our own particular deep dives. But this was a draft, Brendan, in just a big picture mold that got us a little bit back around into the trenches to me at times, that I think is a big part of beyond looking at these players and their upside and where they're going. You went back to, in many ways, even with the Tyrese Knight pick, investing into the front seven, investing into that, into that trench area, and trying to get better in there. And I know for you and my perspective, we've been wanting and banging the drum for many years now to get this offensive line right. They're starting to get that here slowly but surely into place. And I think that the fans are going to see why we've pushed for this for so long, to see these things. There's a lot of changes on this team. It's just one of many, but it's a big change to be able to take an offensive line from the place where it's been, which is a weakness of this team, to starting maybe slowly but surely getting into that point of strength. And same thing with the defensive line, right?
Yeah, I think we're getting there. I mean, we have a massive investment in this defensive line right now. Less so if Draymond moves, but you're still talking about that big contract you gave Leonard Williams. And you're talking about a first-round pick on Murphy. You've got a little bit of money invested into the nose tackle spot. Reed has a multi-year contract, and then you got Hankins and Young, and then you've got, I guess, Mike Morris. You don't really have a big investment there, but you've invested quite a bit into this defensive line now, so it's starting to turn, and I like where it's going. But I do. I really want to see the offensive line part of it come together, even more so than the defensive line, because it's been a while. It's been a while since we've had, 2020, the offensive line was pretty good, right? There was that 1 year where you got Dwayne Brown's last really good year in the NFL, and Brandon Shell had a career year. And it was like, okay, for that 1 year, you had well above average offensive line play, and then it just fell off and you were back to where you were before.
Yeah. And even that line, there was some disparity, I think, in how they played over the course of the year. And then, certainly what you had off the tackles versus the guards and center play, I think was a little different, to that side of it as well. The offensive line remains the thing that people ask me about coming into this offseason, what's the first place you want to see the Seahawks address? What's the first place they should start on with it? I said, offensive line. This is what I want to see take a step forward this offseason. What I've loved to see even stronger of a step taken, where you maybe had addressed it not in the free agency and then you'd also addressed it in the draft, rather than more feeling like, I know Lakin's here and I know you went and got Nick Harris, but you more went and just developed it and decided we're going to do this in the draft more than you were going to go out there and spend the money to do it. And that's fine. Just address it one way or another was all I was asking for, because when it came to the defensive line, offensive line, is it fair to say it's not that they completely ignored both those positions, Brendan, through the years, but they just neglected to put the proper value behind those positions when they went to the team building concepts. Is that fair?
Well, there's that, and there's the fact that they just struck out. They did spend a first-round pick on Jermaine Ifedi, but that was a really bad player to spend a first-round pick on. They spent the second-round pick on Posick, which I think would have been great, but then they play him at guard for 3 years instead of playing him at center. So it's like their attempts to address the position were just, they weren't good. They were bad. So I look at that. And then I look at, like there was that 1 year we went into the season with our starting left tackle being, I think his name was Bradley Sowell or something like that. That was the year we traded for Dwayne Brown halfway through because we realized that wasn't going to work. Just these little things that seemed very neglectful, I guess.
Yeah, I get that's my thing with it is you could find those picks like the Posick or the Ifedi, or even the Damian Lewis for that matter, but you're stretching it over kind of a 6-year period where the addressing of the line and the other picks is just not there. And so it was like that, which only makes when you miss on those picks that much of a bigger miss, because you don't have any other backup plan you had to build in for. You don't have any other secondary spot. It would have been like going into this draft, Brendan, and saying, okay, we got Bradford, but we won't go get Lumea. We won't do anything to address that at that point with that one. First, doubling down a bit in this draft with, we both like LeMay, and there may be a place you come out of where it's LeMay and Haynes end up as your starting guards in the future, and in a kind of reality here when as we go in the future. So, I think that they've maybe understood this a little bit more better now. I think they did it with the tackle draft where you went both Cross and Lucas. Yeah, it was kind of a need, but you could have easily just said, okay, we'll take Cross and then we'll just go find some try hard right tackle guy out there, like we've done a Bradley Soul type, or some former first round pick in 2015 that's washed out. And we'll try to make that work. And instead, you've put a little bit more value into it. It's been third round picks. It's been multiple third round picks now, first round picks. A little bit understanding. It seems like maybe it's just my hopeful optimism on this, that they're kind of learning their lesson with this one, Brendan, and starting to maybe build on what's been a little bit, I'm not saying it's like a big blind spot, but just a tiny little blind spot at times.
Yeah, I think there was that period of time where they really just thought, we're just going to get athletes. We're just going to get guys who look like offensive linemen who are good athletes, and we'll teach them how to play offensive line. Yes. And most of the time it really, really didn't work. But that was their way of trying to address the offensive line without investing anything into it. And
bingo.
Like there was J.R. Sweezy, that worked out pretty well. He was all right. But then you also had, what was his name? Christian Sokolai, I think his name was, where he never got on the field. Obam Gwacham, I think, was another one of them. Like most of those experiments, to call them failures would not even be totally fair. They didn't even get off the launch pad.
Yeah.
So
that's where the Sweezy one almost messed you up, because it caused 5 other ones you brought in here thinking you could replicate the Sweezy thing. And it's like, that was more of a one-off than that was the rule of thumb and how you could develop these guys. But you mentioned it. It just comes down, you've got to pay the price on this. There is no creative way to, what we'll do is bring in athletes. What we'll do is we'll get defensive linemen and we'll turn them into guards. You just got to go and pay the price. And as John was saying a couple of weeks ago, that they've gotten overpriced and you got to spend too much. And I hear, what he's saying on that. I feel the same way about defensive tackles a little bit, but you had to come along to eventually paying the second round pick and then spending $23 million a year for Williams right after you had signed Draymond Jones to the $17.5 million per year deal. Sometimes on certain positions, whether it's overpriced or not, Brendan, you just got to pay it.
Yeah, exactly. It's capitalism. The market decides how much things are worth. If somebody's willing to pay Damian Lewis whatever it was, $15 million a year, I can't even remember what he ended up getting, then that's what he's worth. As much as you and me might disagree with that if someone's willing to give him that, then that's what he's worth, period.
Yeah. And if the only other option is you're flipping players out of position or moving athletes around, then that's not really a great answer on the other side of it. But they've learned this lesson on it. So I guess there's, we've crossed this bridge, at least, thankfully. Randall McDaniel, thank you for another $5 donation. I appreciate you for that. It says, which second or third year player helps the team the most if they turn into a Pro Bowl level player? My vote is Charles Cross.
Yeah, I don't even think it's close with anybody else. It has to be Cross. Like, that's your left tackle. That's a guy who didn't play that well last year because of the injury. It has to be Cross, I think.
So which second or third year player helps the team the most if they go into a Pro Bowl player? So Mike, I'll be a little bit different than Brendan on this one. Cross is a great suggestion, Randall. I'm going to go with Abraham Lucas. Because if Abraham Lucas comes back and he turns into a Pro Bowl player, his knee's good.
That's true.
He's over there doing his thing. And Cross to me is a guy that, I don't think the injury thing is going to be he doesn't have like a knee problem thing like Lucas did. It was a toe thing that should be fine after an offseason of rest. I think Cross comes back, and by all accounts, Brock, you were saying he was looking different. He comes back in third year. He's just solid. He's in that just a little bit below Pro Bowl level. I think your line's looking in great shape if you get the combination of those two. So my vote would probably be Lucas on this one.
Well, for me, it's just like the left tackle position's just much more important than right tackle. So I'm thinking about it like that. And I also think that, this is kind of a big year for Cross as well, by the way, because he didn't play that well last year. Now, I'm kind of throwing that out because he was hurt.
Mm-hmm.
but that's a number 9 overall pick that you use. That's one of your big returns on the Russell Wilson trade. You need that to work out. So to me, that one would definitely be the big one. But I can see Lucas too. Although I'm a little bit afraid, like, first of all, we have to assume that he's actually better, right? Like, he doesn't go out there and play like a Pro Bowler for 3 games and then he gets hurt again and his career's over, right? We're assuming he actually like plays the whole season at that level, right?
I would assume in his question it's built like that it's for the
Yeah.
whole, it'd be for the whole year.
Yeah, that would be nice. I mean, that would remove. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the rumors by now that we really wanted J.C. Latham in the draft. He was a guy we coveted, which tells me that we kind of know that it's not going in a good direction with him. With Lucas.
Well, they wanted, I mean, I think they wanted the insurance there, to your point. They were going to move Latham to guard. So he was going to be a left guard if they took him, based on the reports that I read. And was he there for insurance though? If Lucas couldn't go? Yeah, certainly. And I'm really worried about it, especially the way they're talking about Lucas in the press conference yesterday with Macdonald, where it's still like, it still feels wait and see. And I don't deny anything. Picking Cross is a great pick. Having your left tackle be a Pro Bowl player is going to help your offense out. No doubt about that. Look across the league, and you have teams that are offenses that have a Pro Bowl left tackle. You're probably looking at some grade A offenses in their production. So you can't go wrong with either of those 2 picks. If we couldn't pick either of the 2 tackles, Brendan, give me one more, just as the third guy.
Okay.
Tackles are a little easy,
Yeah,
that's kind of we're taking the easy way out on this one.
Which second? Okay, let me think here for a second. Derek Hall.
That was the one I was going to say too. There we go. So we're of like mind on the third one there, Randall. We may be different with Cross and Lucas, but third one, Derek Hall. I'm locked in on that one too. That'd be if he steps forward, my goodness, you got him and Uchenna and Boye rolling. You're in good shape at that point. Don't need nothing from Darrell Taylor. Nothing.
Yeah, a lot of people are still thinking like Macdonald can fix him. I'm getting a lot of comments from people who just really think that Macdonald's going to turn him into Von Miller or something.
What do you think about that, Brendan?
I don't know. He's too small. He's just too small. He's been in this league a little too long to still make as many mental mistakes as he does. I don't know, and we don't need it anymore, especially if Draymond's moving to edge. We don't need him. He's going to play like 5 snaps a game. Who cares? I
mean, that's where I'm at with him, and I just the money you save. I guess they figured out Did they do the contract thing with him? They didn't do that. Or that was somebody else they did that with.
No, they gave him.
Yeah,
they gave him 3.1 and a $20,000 signing bonus, and I theorized that he had like a credit card bill that he needed to pay, and they wanted to help him out, because it was the exact same amount as the tender would have been, just with the $20,000 signing bonus.
And non-guaranteed, right?
Well, the signing bonus is guaranteed, but everything else is non-guaranteed.
We'll see where that goes. I'm still interested to see if he does finally make the team, especially once they put pads on. Nelson Caesar out there. We'll see how it rolls at that point. But those would be the three guys we'd lock into there, Randall. Great question.
Mm-hmm.
Randall with another $5 donation. Thank you, Randall. Appreciate all these donos, man. He says it would be interesting case study to see over the past decade the average number of guys who earned a second contract with the drafted team. Good way to rate success of a draft. Well, I can tell you we've not been good on that realm, have we, Brendan? As far as guys getting second contracts here over the past 5 or 6 years.
Probably, if you go back like 10 years, probably the worst in the league.
Yeah.
It's bad. It's been really bad. And that's one reason why we are in this situation right now, where we don't have a lot of success over the last 8 years to point to.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a fair way of putting it and characterizing it. I don't know which teams have been the best at this off the top of my head. Who would be a team that we feel like would be a team that's probably done it well, retaining their own? Maybe the Rams.
Well, the Rams never have any picks, so their rate is probably really high.
Yeah, it's true.
Philadelphia seems pretty good, I guess.
KC, maybe.
Yeah, Chiefs are probably good. Chiefs have to let a lot of guys go because of all the big money they've given to some of their stars, but that's for every team. Every team has to deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's totally true there.
Cowboys are probably pretty good. They've been drafting well lately.
They give everybody a contract. You just need to have like one good game, and Jerry will be like, "Give him a contract. No, we got to get ahead of this. We got to get ahead of this right now. I don't care. Just
Yeah.
give him. We're gonna save money in the long term. I know we got to spend now."
Yeah, and also they'll let you they let you get to the end of your contract, so that way you can squeeze them for the most possible money. They
Oh,
don't
yeah.
take care of you after 3 years. They make you wait, and
Oh,
then
no.
you're like, okay, well, I'm not giving you a break either now.
Yeah, you're gonna pay
It's
me
great.
all the money. Pay me all the money now.
Mhm.
So yeah, those would be the teams that I think we have, but we haven't been good at it, Randall. I think we'll start to be good at it once you see the drafts turn around. The draft started to turn around 2 years ago. So after this year, these guys, if Moppy goes out and balls out again this year, if Kenneth Walker balls out this year, if Charles Cross balls out this year, those could be guys that start to change this trend for us of recent not signing guys to contract extensions. And that'd be good to see. I think you're right. It does speak to a lot of your success in the draft, whether you're giving those second contracts out. Versus, like Brendan said, having the 10-year run we've had, Randall, recently of, especially, I mean, I don't think we've given out a second contract to a guy on the offensive line, Brendan.
Posick. We gave Posick a 1-year deal after his rookie deal was up.
Wasn't it a tender thing still though on that?
No, it was a free agent 1-year deal.
Okay. So you get you there. That's it. That's all you got on it with the line. So it's been brutal with the line.
I mean, I guess we let J.R. Sweezy leave and then come back 6 years later and gave him a contract. There was that.
That kind of counts, I suppose.
Yeah, that's it. Not good.
Not good. We do good with wide receivers, though. We get the wide receivers usually on a second contract. So
yeah,
once we hit on those ones do all right with it. As long as they're not fourth rounders that we cut prior to training camp. Mm-hmm. That's the caveat on that one.
Yeah, at least those ones don't linger around forever. Like, I'd rather have a Chris Harper than a D. Eskridge who is still here after 3 years. You know?
It is gonna be rough watching Melton cook for the Packers this year, though, right?
Oh yeah, you're right. Melton over there. That is probably going to be pretty good.
They got a lot of receivers, though. We might have a hard time cracking the lineup. Randall, again, man, thank you for all your support and donations on the channel there. Great questions as well. And totally agree with you, man. I think second contract rate with teams would be an interesting thing to dive into to see who's been the best at that. Radu Turkan, thank you for the $5 donation, Radu. Appreciate you as well, brother. It's great to see you in the house tonight, too. Says, y'all are determined 2025 is probably the year for true success. But to me, I don't see why not. It can't be this year. Harbaugh did it. Why can't we?
It can happen. It does happen. Like, McVay made the playoffs his first year. Mm-hmm. McVay won the division his first year, right? Yeah, he did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Harbaugh almost made the Super Bowl his first year. I think he's talking about Jim, his first year with San Fran.
I agree. I think so as well.
Mm-hmm. Sean, going way back to 2006 with New Orleans, Sean Payton made the playoffs and made the AFC title game his first year, actually. So it does happen. Now, I think we have to take a couple things into consideration. Like, this is going to be a tough division. Like, this division will not be fun to maneuver. And that's going to diminish our expected wins output, I think.
Agreed. 100%.
And, I mean, we went through the schedule. I think we both think this team is probably going to make the playoffs. So, I mean, it's not like we're super down on the team for this year. Neither of us are. But I'm not expecting this year to be the year we make a run at, like, the title or anything like that. I will acknowledge that.
I think that what you mentioned there is definitely in play here, Radu. What comes down to for me on this is there's so much that goes back and forth up against each other in this scenario and trying to weigh out where the team's going to finish out at. Brendan just mentioned, for instance, the schedule. The schedule was set up as preferably as we've seen in recent years for your Seattle Seahawks to find success this year, and how the NFL structured it from the middle bye to not as many 10 a.m. games to the opponents that you play. It's all set up very well. You also have a really talented team. So you have a coach that's just moved on. And typically when coaches move on, like when Tom Landry moved on from the Cowboys in the late 80s and Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones had to take over, and they got that team turned around to a dynasty after they traded Herschel Walker and got the trade back on that. They had a roster that was empty. It was devoid of talent. But that's not what Macdonald's walking into. So it's not maybe as the atypical scenario of a head coach walking in who has to just go in like Carroll did. I'm going to have to churn through this roster. What they do, 1,500, 5,000 moves in 3 years or some weird thing like that, where they're moving through players in the first couple of years over and over again, where you're like, man, this roster is empty. We've got to slowly stock this thing all back up. It's actually not maybe super stocked, but it's, the cupboard ain't bare. It's got some, there's some cans of tuna and, some chunky soup in there. So there's stuff to work with. So you have that on the plus side, but then we have the simplified to the complicated, Brendan. You're going from the most simplified on both sides of the ball, Radu, on offense and defense, to one of the most complicated on both sides of the ball in how you run it. So does that happen instantaneously? Does that take some time? Maybe, maybe not. I would tend to think when I just throw it all into the wash that I come out to the other side of there'll be some good, there'll be some down, there'll be some ironing out of the wrinkles as you're trying to institute this thing in. Mike Macdonald's only got 20% of his defense even implemented it right now as it stands. How will that be different next year? So I still do say, Brad, 2025 is yes, the place I look at, but I also say that I'm not dead set on this year has no chance to find success. But there's so many things that go into this. Brendan mentioned another one with the division and how hard we're going to have the toughest division in football again. How does that factor into it? It's a lot of different things going back up against each other. And the data doesn't all just point to one certainty or one probability. It sort of throws a lot of different chaotic probabilities into the bucket. And it could kind of go in a lot of different directions. And I don't mean that to sit on the fence, Radu, but just to say it's hard to predict with all that kind of chaos.
Yeah. I just, I'm going to be open to it. I'm going to be open to this team ending up having a higher ceiling than I expected. There is some pretty good talent here, but I'm also trying to be realistic at the same time here. And realistically, like don't forget, beyond just implementing his defense, Mike Macdonald has to learn how to be a head coach in the NFL. He's never done it before. He's never been a head coach on any level. So there is going to be some element of coaching at that level that he's not going to be totally comfortable with, that he is going to have to learn on the fly.
And it's hard to learn all that stuff without it. Kind of, you got to get the bumps, right? You got to get the bruises. You got to get the strawberries on the knees, right? Like if I'm going to learn to ride the skateboard, there's going to be some times I'm going to fall off and skid. And that's the way. There's only so much that Frazier can show him, that grizzled old coach he brought in to kind of show him those things that he doesn't not know. There's just only so much. You're going to run into those things that are the learning points you have as that new head coach to kind of figure out, oh, I shouldn't have done it this way. I need to do it that way.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm going to keep an open mind though, for sure.
Absolutely. And it's the potential is there, Radu, though. Me and him have us kind of right around that, just maybe sliding in the playoffs, maybe right on the outskirts, right in there. Both me and Brendan can also see where this team gets a couple extra more wins throughout the course of this year, if things can come together that fast. It's just hard to predict that off of given history, because more often than not, it does tend to take a bit of a year. Like it took Jimmy Johnson. What were they that first year? 1-15 or something. I think that first year with Aikman. So it's just the nature of the beast sometimes. Thank you, Radu. Appreciate the donation though. Roxanne, thank you for another $5 donation. She says, Brendan Nelson, I have heard Hawks Nest Brandon do commentary in various voices to hilarious effect. Do you have any talents in that vein?
I've said this before. I used to be able to do like Werner Herzog, the impression, but I lost it a while ago. I can't do it anymore. You lose it sometimes. You just lose it.
I have a bunch that I used to be able to do that I can't do as much anymore, that have just completely gone to the wind. So yeah, they can kind of slide away if you're not on top of them all the time. So
yeah, so not really anything like that. Unfortunately, but yeah. I used to be able to do a little bit of that kind of stuff, but I didn't really do it in the videos. I used to have a really bad microphone too. It wouldn't have worked very well.
You do need the right microphone to have it come off right, if it's got a deal to it. I'm going to do a Cosell Seahawks season prep video in Howard Cosell voice. So I'm going to,
there you go. That's pretty good.
I'm working on that right now. Working on that right now. He's not as hard to do though. Just get that New York accent. Lean on it. But thank you, Roxanne. I appreciate you for that.
You know, real quick here. I know you can do an Al Pacino. I know you can.
Yeah, I can. So what?
But can you do Tony Montana?
I gotta hear Tony, and then I can do it direct if I just off the top of my head try to do it.
Yeah.
Say hello to the bad guy. It's not right. And I gotta hear it direct,
It's
and
like
then I
that
can do it.
really over the top Cuban accent,
Totally, yeah.
because that's a good one. I like that one.
Je nomme, je nomme. It's a good one to do, but it's one that if I'm not hearing it like right direct and then doing it, I completely lose it. But I just do the old Pacino though.
Yeah.
What do you want here?
Hmm.
that kind of Pacino. But no, that's a good one. I've tried to do that one, and I can do it right after I've done it on the YouTube and like try to do the voice, and I can do it, but then it just
Hmm.
tilts. It's such a specific, over
Yeah.
the top Cuban voice.
I
Or-
don't think Scarface is a great movie. I do think that's Pacino's best performance, though, because
Hmm.
he is such a detestable person. The
Mhm.
character of Tony Montana is such a despicable, detestable person, but you still like him because he's a little bit better than everyone else in the movie that he's working with. And Pacino makes him just a little bit likable, even though he's this horrible human being that you should never be rooting for or appreciating at all. And he pulls it
I,
off. I think that's remarkable.
I agree. I think I definitely one of Pacino might be Pacino's best. I haven't thought about where I'd land on which one's his exact best, but that could definitely be the one.
Yeah.
He has got so many performances where it's like talk about tough to pick the one, but no, and then you got it's a perfect script from Stone that goes to De Palma with Pacino. You talk about the top of each of their craft at that time,
Hmm.
and all being a perfect little synergy. I mean, if that was a football team, it's like the head coach with the perfect offensive coordinator and the quarterback on the field at the same time in his prime, and you had all those three elements working together. Because that story, you could mess that up very easily because he is such a detestable. It's hard to make the main character as being as kind of a hole as he kind of is in that to a degree, but still make him likable at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Not easy. Not easy.
Not easy.
Hmm.
It's a good movie though. It's a good
Hmm.
movie. First you get the money, then you get the power. Then you get the power, and you get the women.
Hmm. That's pretty good. He's the only man who can say the word pelican and make it sound cool.
Pelican.
Yeah.
Look at
Look at the
get
pelican.
the
Uh-huh.
pelican. Get the pelican.
Like the New Orleans Pelicans need to use that somehow because they have the worst name in sports. But if they
Oh, it
could
is
lean
bad.
to that Tony Montana element of it, I think
How
they
did
would
they
make it
land
work.
on Pelican? How
Yeah.
did that get into the list even of consideration, much less voted as the best? What was
Hmm.
second place on that?
I mean, they should.
Turtle Dove?
Well, I think the play has always been give them jazz back because jazz was originally theirs, and Utah jazz makes no sense whatsoever. There's no
It
jazz in
doesn't.
Utah. There's jazz in New Orleans. Give Utah something appropriate to Utah, and we're good.
What we gotta do is we give the Lakers to to the Utah for Salt
Mhm.
Lake City, and then give the Jazz to New Orleans.
Yeah,
I think
and
that's
yeah,
that. No. And then LA changes to whatever.
yeah. It's too iconic now, though. The Lakers thing is
I
that
know.
you can
Yeah.
never take that away. It's too late. They should have
No.
figured this out.
And even they came from Minnesota originally. That's why they're
Hmm.
the Lakers. So
Right?
none of it makes sense anywhere.
Exactly.
Um, but Randall, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, how did Hall's combine compare to Maffe's size speed?
Without looking it up, I think Maffei's combine was better,
Yes.
but I'm not 100% sure. That's just me not looking it up, going off of memory.
Maffe's was indeed a better combine. At the end of the day, they both had the same. They both had some similar numbers at the end of the day. The 40-yard dash 4.55 for 4.53. So Boye Mafe was just a little bit faster there. 1.59 10-yard split for Boye Mafe. 1.59 10-yard split for Derek Hall. 261 pounds for Mafe, 254 pounds for Hall. So Mafe a little bit heavier, but Mafe had a better vert and a little bit of a better broad jump from Hall. So there's kind of some similar comparisons. At the end, they're really more similar than they are dissimilar, to be honest with you. Hall's got a little bit longer arms, but the arm size is fine on both of them. So kind of similar. I think Maffe's the 10-yard split thing. I think even though the 1.59 is similar on that, I think Maffe's definitely got a little bit more get off in the challenge of that. But similar, Randall.
Yeah. I just remember really liking Mafe in that draft. I remember he was one of my guys, and the combine was a part of it. And Hall, I liked Hall fine, but he was not one of my guys the way that Mafe was.
Yeah, makes sense. Mafe was one of the only guys in that draft, along with like Aiden Hutchinson, and there was like maybe one other guy that hit that 6'4", sub 159, 10-yard split with the arm length at the certain spot and explosiveness scores on the vert. Like he hit a kind of markers that's kind of rare for edge rushers, and if you hit all those markers, it tends to be a pretty good precursor for success. So hopefully Randall Hall can take that second year leap. But he certainly has the athleticism and explosiveness to be a guy that could take a leap like Mafe did last year along those lines, which I think is a little bit baked within your question there, Randall.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you though, man. Appreciate you for that. Radu, thank you for another $2 donation. He says the number one goal is beat the Niners so I can talk my shit laughing out loud.
Yeah, it's becoming a problem. All these Niner games not going our way. It's starting to get old.
And they're feeling themselves so much. I mean, what's nice is they lost the Super Bowl, so it's kind of got them licking their wounds this whole offseason and infighting and all that. And, they haven't gotten a championship, thank God, through this run that they've had, so we haven't had to deal with that part of it. But it would be nice to have a year where we get to talk a little bit back to them. We've had to take it for a couple of years now, and it'd be like, I'd kind of like to go in and be able to shut these guys up with like, your window's over with. Did you hear the sound of that shut? Did you hear that? Did you hear that thing close? You hear that thing that just closed? That's your Super Bowl window, Niners. And I think, Brendan, they got ready. They got one more year left. I looked at their cap situation, $35 million of negative money heading into next offseason as it stands. The Brandon Ayuk situation that sits over the top of the organization, the Brock Purdy contract that's coming down the pike next offseason, the Trent Williams retirement that is just around the corner. I think that they're facing the bill due pretty soon here, don't you as well, Brendan?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine them not, especially with they're going to have to pay Purdy. That's right. Inevitable. And I do think they will, by the way. There was a time where I thought maybe they just let him go and be like, okay, new quarterback. We can do it again. We did it once, we can do it again. I don't think they're going to do that now.
No, I think they're locked in and stuck on him at that point. So you walk into next offseason, you're already at that $38 million of negative money as we stand. I know they can move money around to a degree, but you're moving money around at that point to just try to get another cap, and then you've got to sign the Purdy deal on top of that, and you have the Ayuk money. Both of those two big dollar deals weighing down on anything that might be offset by having to get rid of Kittle, or if that's the other way they go. And if you get rid of Kittle, now they're that much weaker. So they're going to still be strong this year. They're not going anywhere, Radu, but this run is getting closer and closer to the end. It's not like it's going to elongate out for another 6-7 years here because they just got everything ready to go there. So see if they can sustain.
Mm-hmm.
But talk your stuff, man. You let those Niners know. Not long. Hoist hand grenade with the $2 donations is the Utah Mormons. I was thinking about going there with it, but I was like, okay, we'll go with the Salt Lakes.
Yeah, you got to do something that's going to make as many people as possible are going to like it. Yeah, and you're only going to like Utah Mormons if you yourself are a Mormon. Probably.
That's true. That's true. Big old M on the big center of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, if it's not Salt Lake and we're not doing the Mormon thing, what is it about Utah that we would go to? What has Utah got?
Yeah, they'd probably,
the Salt Lake skiers.
I don't know. It's not easy, but I'm sure you can find something that makes more sense than jazz.
Yeah, there'd be something with it. Jazz just is weird. That's an odd one to go. Utah, that jazz mecca, the birthplace of jazz, Salt Lake City. But thank you, Holy Hand Grenade, for the don't know, man. I appreciate you on that. And very kind to all of you guys, Radu, Randall, Roxanne, Barry, Satoro, Kodad. Appreciate you, Upo, God's Gang. You guys are amazing on the support as ever on the channel here. So thank you so much, you guys. So just to wrap this up, I won't prolong this much more, Brendan. We're 2.5 hours in here, I know, but feeling as good about the draft as you did on draft day, a little bit better with this. I mean, the drafts are always going to be more heavier weighted to the top. We're looking at the top guys here. We're about a month now forward from the draft happening outside of the emotionality of the moment. Same place you were draft day, a little bit better. And overall, just feeling good about this draft in succession with the last two.
Yeah, I'd say about the same. I don't think I've moved too much. I probably like Barner a little bit more. I like Knight a little bit less. So I think it kind of evens out.
Evens out. And a solid class for the trenches that works well in tandem with these last two classes.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. I don't think there's very much to dislike in this draft. Even like Knight. If Knight is just like a vanity pick for Macdonald where he just gets a funny feeling about this guy and he ends up being completely wrong, it's not that big of a deal.
Not at all. Not at all. And anything just turns into a learning situation for him. And worst case, you got depth at the linebacker position, which isn't the worst thing to have. Fourth round guys, you said earlier in this. The expectation level's got to be in place with where the guy's being picked at. And middle, late fourth round, you got to understand that guys that picked in that territory don't tend to be starters anyway. So we can't think of it through that view. That's why the guys at the top matter so much in getting those picks right, because those guys do tend to be the impact players. Those guys do tend to be your starters. And the Seahawks with Haynes and with Byron Murphy got that part right. Well, my name is, sorry, you were going to say something?
No.
Oh, I just want to make sure. Well, my name is Brandon Kane, and this is, of course, Seahawks Brandon Nelson. If you guys could, for me on the way out the door, hit that like button for us on either end, wherever you're watching. We will be back next Thursday to start doing a breakdown here of the last of the draft, the back end here, and look at a couple of UDFAs. Me and Brennan are going to just kind of handpick a couple of UDFAs. We're not going to do a full deep dive, but just guys that we think are going to likely make the roster or likely to have an impact. Anything going down in your world over on your channel right now, Brendan, we should be aware of?
No, we're just going to kind of wait for things to happen and then talk about it as it happens, which we are headed into the dead zone here, but we're going to have fun this offseason. We're going to figure things out. Yeah, that's really all I can say right now.
All that it feels like a good spot to cut on that. Then we'll be back around here in a week. We are going through the off season, but here, be it Seahawks Brandon Nelson, the Hawks Nest, the off season never stops. So we will keep on cooking on through here on this side of it. Really, really appreciate you guys watching, and I want to thank all of you guys for all of the support and donations as well in the chat today. As you guys are just unbelievable in that respect, as you guys always are. We'll be back in a week, but until that time, my fellow Seahawks faithful, good things are happening. Bright young players on the rise, the youngest head coach in football running a cutting-edge scheme. Old problems being solved, or at least they're working in the process to find solutions to those problems. The future's looking bright. Hope you're on board. Hope we don't have to remind you to get on board, but just in case, me and Brennan are going to let you know anyway right now. Do not you ever forget. Do not let it happen. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.